How are you? My name is Naveen Girishankar. I am the president of the Economic Security and Technology Department here at CSIS. We're newly formed. I think some of you may have heard about us. Our main focus is to provide strategic insights, practical policy solutions for the U.S. and allies to maintain technology and economic advantages that will be important for security, for resilience, for a security of our markets and democracies. A central pillar of that work is the work of the Renewing American Innovation program that my colleague Sujay Shivkumar and his team lead. It's a real spearhead for a lot of the work that we're doing, and so we're just delighted to have this event today, which is really quite stellar, bringing together cooperative research institutions from a number of countries. Obviously the US, New York creates, Imec from Belgium, Leti from France, Fraunhofer, Germany, LSTC, Japan, just a phenomenal group of institutions. One of the things that, Sujay has been writing about and talking about with his team is that this is the tip of the spear, the cold face, whatever metaphor you want to use for the future of technology cooperation, particularly around semiconductors, for the U.S. and allies around the world. This is, I came from the Commerce Department recently and working on the CHIPS agenda, realized how central this has been and will continue to be. I know that our colleagues from NSTC will also be joining and several folks from the Commerce Department. I would say that this is going to be more and more important as we go forward, and so venues like this, conversations like the ones that you'll have today, will be critical to create this policy space for figuring out what the frontier looks like. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Sujay, but just really congratulate him and his team for putting this together. We'll be listening intently on the conversations today. And with that, let me hand it over to my colleague. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to today's Symposium on Allied Cooperation on Semiconductor Research and Development. Thank you, Naveen, for the kind introduction. I'm a senior fellow here at CSIS and I direct the program on Renewing American Innovation. Active and effective research and development cooperation for semiconductors is really essential. It's the driver for competitiveness, economic growth, and our national security of both the United States and its allies. The networks, both regional and international, that connect and foster this cooperation are a focus of our meeting here today. In particular, I think it's important to understand the challenges of cooperation within extremely complex networks of firms, universities, research, and other organizations, and given the complexity of the technology itself. It's always easy to understand that cooperation, the outcome is a win-win, but getting there, it requires enormous amounts of effort to recognize shared opportunities, shared challenges, as well as the rules of engagement across multiple stakeholders. How do we, for example, get the resources that are going into this process? How do we share the benefits of the outcomes? And how do we trust each other in the process? So cooperative research organizations are really the institutional solutions that we have to sort out a lot of these shared challenges in cooperation. They serve as critical aggregators of research and development, resources across firms, as well as shared infrastructure for de-risking emerging technologies throughout the semiconductor value chain. So this is an area where our innovation program here at CSIS has investigated at some depth and have published reports which can be accessed outside and on our website as well. Reports on the major cooperative research organizations, CROs, including Rapidus, Leti, Imec, and New York Creates. For the United States, expanded cooperation across these CROs is an opportunity to accelerate the progress of U.S. semiconductor research programs, strengthen its alliances, and reduce the costs and research of infrastructure. So indeed, there is a strong need for international cooperation in semiconductor R&D, and we are fortunate to have Dana Weinstein from the White House to begin our program by making this case. There's also a strong need for public research and development investments and partnerships to underpin this cooperation. We will also hear from Irvin Gianchandani from the National Science Foundation Technology, Innovation and Partnership Directorate on why sustained public support at scale is needed for success. We'll then turn directly to hearing from some of these cooperative research organizations. Mariam Ko from NatCast will moderate the first panel with leaders from New York Creates, Francis Letty, Japan's Rapidus, and NatCast on emerging networks in semiconductor research and development cooperation. Next, Charles Wessner from Georgetown University and an esteemed senior advisor to our program here will moderate the second part of this panel, drawing in leaders from Germany's Fraunhofer and Belgium's Imec. Sri Ramaswamy from Commerce will also share his thoughts on the significance of the growth of these networks across allies. The final panel, which I have the honor to moderate, draws in the perspectives of two of our leading universities, Purdue and Arizona State University, to understand their roles as contributors and connectors within regions, as well as across emerging allied networks. So with that, let me introduce Dana Weinstein and ask her to come and join us here for her remarks. Dana is a Principal Assistant Director and Special Advisor for the CHIPS R&D and Industrial Innovation at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. She is a professor at Purdue School of Electrical and Computer Engineering, and she previously served as an associate professor at MIT. Many prestigious awards, which I don't have time to get into, unfortunately, but so glad to have you here today with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sujay, and to CSIS for hosting this very important meeting. I'm very much eager to learn what all of you have to say on the international space today. So as Sujay mentioned, I am over at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, leading the microelectronics R&D portfolio in OSTP. I'm also the chair of the Subcommittee on Microelectronics Leadership, which includes an interagency working group on international affairs. And so this is all very pertinent. There's so much activity in the space right now, and there are so many important topics to resolve. Arguably, since the Cold War, the U.S. has been the leading superpower in advanced technology R&D, with innovative universities and labs across the country for pre-competitive research, and then a thriving private sector for advanced development and commercialization. But in recent years, of course, we have seen other nations narrowing that technology leadership gap, and in some cases even surpassing it in areas including 5G and batteries, and of course, in advanced semiconductor manufacturing. Among such progress in many of the allied and like-minded nations that are represented here today, here and online, there are also other countries, most notably the PRC, that have risen, right? And now China is perhaps the most consequential strategic competitor to the US. So Chinese President Xi Jinping vowed to win the battle with the US over developing critical technology. And with that vow came large investments from the PRC, public funding for semiconductor R&D. And a report from the SIA back in 2022 granted, and things are so dynamically shifting, so these numbers are obviously slightly out of date, but gives us a sign of where things are at. The PRC, the fraction of funding that they got, that they put into semiconductor research and development was more than 50% from their government. In Taiwan, the EU, Japan, and South Korea, that percentage was more like 20 to 25. In the US, 17%. We rely very heavily on industry investment into semiconductor R&D, and the industry has done that in full force, and we continue to be the leaders, but again, narrowing the gap and risking the industry has to bear not only the burden of that R&D investment based off of their revenue, but also have to bear the risk of that research. And so we see the portfolio of the R&D kind of limited from that perspective, as well as engagement across the entire semiconductor ecosystem, including down to academia and across between industries. So direct public funding has an important role to play in de-risking fundamental research and allowing us to leapfrog in technologies as needed. That investment gap has been large not only for the US but also for our allied countries, even though they too are still higher than us in terms of fractional investment from their governments. And so something we need to address. What has been the impact of some of those massive investments from China and other countries? Well, there are many ways to measure the impact of R&D. Patents filed are one of those possible measures. Again, in 2022, there was a huge increase in the number of patents filed globally, 69,000 patents filed across the world associated with microelectronics in one form or another. And that was a 59% increase relative to 5 years prior. And that reflects the fact that we have very aggressive commercial and application demands, AI being, of course, the #1 driver in terms of the need for high-performance computation and the end of Dennard's scaling, meaning that we need to innovate in device architectures, in new materials, in computational architectures, in security. There are so many different novel innovations that have to happen very quickly now in order to keep up with the demand and in order to stay competitive. So of that 59% increase in patents filed in those 5 years, about 55% of that came from China, right? That obviously in response to the large investments that were made. The US was second only to that, with 26% of that increase. The UK in comparison, 0.26%, obviously smaller country, doing fantastic work, but the output really is reflected by the investments that are made. All right, so the US and all of the allied nations have certainly recognized and owned that need to retain and to regain leadership in advanced technology R&D. And from that, the Biden-Harris administration, of course, launched the CHIPS and Science Act back in 22 with a $52 billion investment for onshoring and building up capacity in manufacturing of advanced semiconductor technology, but also a big part of that, 11 billion, 13 billion if you consider DoD, dedicated to R&D and recognizing that we are continuously needing to innovate. And of course, there are similar commitments from the EU, from Japan, large investments from South Korea. Still, microelectronics R&D is, especially at the advanced technology nodes, profoundly expensive. And technological breakthroughs take years, not only to innovate, but then also to translate to production. There is a great deal of infrastructure that needs to be stood up and maintained, physical facilities, including access to fabrication, to packaging, to metrology, digital facilities like costly EDA and IP sharing, data sharing and standards to make those data useful, especially given the opportunity and the rise in AI and how we are leveraging AI to actually accelerate innovation. Talent and expertise do not rise up overnight. They are also built up over decades. And we need supporting services and infrastructure for encouraging competitive entrepreneurship. So all of that together, right, combined with vulnerabilities that are external to the national semiconductor ecosystem, supply chain disruption, access to critical materials and chemicals, global socio-political stressors, all of that kind of combines together to let us know that it does not make sense to duplicate efforts, especially given limited resources. Competition is healthy and inevitable, but everyone recognizes the need and appreciates the need to work together. That has been highlighted on the National Strategy for Microelectronics Research, where international cooperation and collaboration is clearly outlined. So I'm very excited. This is a very timely conversation to be having, given all of that as a backdrop. There are clear signals that we need to develop guidance, policy, support, and investment in international cooperation versus competition, and provide open innovation opportunities while managing risk. So with that in mind, I'm very eager to hear about what all of you have to say today to help inform some of the big movements that we need to make together in the coming years. Thank you very much.
So it's now my pleasure to welcome Irvin Jinchandani, the Assistant Director for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships at the National Science Foundation. Before becoming the NSF Assistant Director for TIP, Irvin served as a Senior Advisor for Translation, Innovation, and Partnerships for over a year. I think he's probably one of the hardest working and most capable civil servants or public servants I've ever encountered, routinely getting 4 a.m. emails from him. So, and I think that's reflected in the fact that he recently received the Distinguished Presidential Rank Award, which is awarded to members of the federal government Senior Executive Service for sustained extraordinary accomplishment. And you can see where that is coming from. And in 2018, he was awarded the Outstanding Young Engineering Graduate Award from the University of Virginia. So clearly this is a trend. So with that, Irvin, welcome. To basically set the stage, can you introduce us to this new Directorate for Technology, Innovation, Partnerships at NSF?
Sure. Well, thanks for the kind words, and thanks for having me. It's a team effort at NSF and in the TIP Directorate especially. Really delighted to be here and to be a part of the conversation. At NSF, as part of the CHIPS and Science Act that became law in 2022, we established the new Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. We don't do this every day. First new unit at NSF in more than 32 years, as a matter of fact, with a particular focus on how can we, in recognition of the challenges that we face as a nation and as a world today, in terms of accelerated technological competition. You just heard Dana talk a little bit about that. In the context of semiconductors, but really holistically across key technology areas, AI, quantum, really everything that semiconductors power at the end of the day as well. Not to mention the fact that we face a number of, I think, pivotal societal and economic challenges as a world also. I think these are factors that motivated and inspired Congress to include the and science part as part of the CHIPS and Science legislation to authorize the establishment of TIP, and we're super excited to have a mission that aligns with the broader NSF mission, but in our case is really focused on how do we accelerate technology to practice. Could be commercialization, could be socioeconomic impact in a variety of different ways. How do we really harness, as my boss, the director of NSF, likes to say, the full geography of innovation that exists across the country? There's talent in every corner of the country that is sort of our unique asset here in the U.S. Those different perspectives and backgrounds, how do we bring those to bear in that technological acceleration and maturation? And how do we do this in a way that I think is going to also recognize that different parts of the country are different centers, if you will. They can be sort of ecosystems in their own right that can collectively drive a national competitive agenda for the United States. So we're really excited about that mission. We have embarked with a number of key programs and also in partnership with other parts of NSF in the semiconductor space specifically as well.
You spoke a little bit about the circumstances leading to the passage of CHIPS and Science Act. and the establishment of the directorate. Some of the initiatives from the directorate has been including these NSF engines and so forth. Tell us a little bit about what those engines are and how they reinforce cooperation across regions, and also, how does this connect? What's the importance of the international connections in making sure that our regions are connected to the innovation economy?
Yeah, so the Engines program, NSF Regional Innovation Engines program, is really a flagship effort of the TIP Directorate and the National Science Foundation. In many ways, it's a sister program to the regional tech hubs that many of you have, I'm sure, heard about, that our colleagues at the Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Administration there have pioneered. And we've worked very closely with EDA, in fact, over the last 2.5 years as we've thought about engines, they've thought about tech hubs, and we've tried to find the synergies between the two as well. But our goal for engines is really to think about sort of place-based innovation and how that contributes to really a new frontier in terms of America's industrial innovation base for the mid-21st century. So in a nutshell, for me, each engine, right, is successful in the sense that it's bringing together a broad coalition of public and private actors and stakeholders in a particular region that they define for themselves. And they are about trying to figure out how are we going to work together to really position our region based off of our unique assets in our region, our unique expertise in our region. How are we going to position ourselves as the nation's leader, potentially the world's leader in a particular technology space, in a particular topic space going forward? I think a recognition here is that we are trying really hard to be able to support communities and regions all across the country, right? Not everybody, I think it's a misnomer to say, I want to aspire to be Silicon Valley, or I want to aspire to be Kendall Square. I want to aspire to be the regional innovation leader for my particular region, and understanding that that local level context matters as a starting point is a really important element of this, because where you might get to over 2, 5, 10 years may be different than an engine somewhere else in the country, depending upon where it's situated and what assets it has exposure to beyond NSFs. But just to give you one example, right? You asked about the international context, and so I'll weave that in here. One of the engines that we have funded that's actually squarely in the space of the CHIPS Act as well is an engine, the Central Florida Semiconductor engine, based in Osceola County, Florida. So to our knowledge, Osceola County has the only municipal-owned fab in the United States. They have worked with, they're leasing that space out to Skywater Technologies, and they have brought together a coalition of many public and private partners to really position Osceola County as a national and world leader when it comes to advanced packaging technologies, which is of course critical for the next generation of chipsets and so on. That's an investment by the NSF Engines program to not only support the technological innovation around advanced packaging, but to support talent creation and help talent move up the socioeconomic ladder as well. They are literally taking thousands of workers making minimum wage at various organizations in and around Orlando and giving them internship opportunities, giving them apprenticeship opportunities, in that municipal-owned fab and beyond, that allows them to be able to, in turn, move up the socioeconomic ladder and find jobs of the future. Great example, just in the last few months, they've taken somebody who was a line cook at restaurants, making minimum wage or near minimum wage, given them this internship opportunity. That individual is now working at the fab and making considerably more than what they had been making previously. That's the kind of shift, and they're contributing to technological innovation along the way. That's the kind of shift that we're hoping these engines will afford. And I'll note that that particular engine is not doing this in a vacuum, to your point. To do this well, we have to harness our collaborations with like-minded countries around the world too. In fact, the US-based component of Imec is there working with the team. I think we have some folks from there here in the room today as well. And we also see collaborations that they're building with Taiwan and Korea and so forth as well. So I think this is a all hands on deck approach to your point, but it's about doing so in a way that is directly aligned with U.S. national competitiveness and national security.
So you have a lot of linkages being created, both in terms of facilities into the local economies and drawing the workforce into the innovation economy. You also have a lot of initiatives that are connecting our the resources that we find amongst our allies into the system as well. All of this is, it's very welcome, and it seems a very positive thing. But for these networks to grow, you need, what do you need in terms of, it requires some patience, correct?
Well, so it requires some patience, right? It requires, I think, it requires patience, but it also requires to be very direct and blunt, putting your foot on the gas as well, right? I mean, I think that you can't shy away from the hard work and the tremendous amount of effort that it takes to build meaningful partnerships, meaningful relationships. That doesn't happen overnight, to your point. It takes patience, but it takes persistent and determined hard work over time to be able to orchestrate that. You know, the effort in Osceola County, Florida. There are other examples in North Dakota and the Great Lakes region, in Arizona, and so on, right? These are efforts that come about through many years of pulling together a coalition and then also working at it over the course of the funding that NSF is providing. It also requires, I think, sustained investment on the part of, Dana mentioned it a little while ago, sustained investment on the part of taxpayers to help catalyze some of the startups and small businesses that come out of these ecosystems that then the private sector can take to the next level, right, through venture investment and so forth. But that initial seed funding in basic research, whether it be foundational or use-inspired, it requires a real sustained commitment, I think, on the part of the federal government to be able to enable that and empower that going forward.
So in a sense, you're connecting existing investments to bringing more people into the innovation economy. That provides sort of the foundation for continued support. So what you're trying to build is a sort of a virtuous cycle of innovation-based growth and greater inclusivity.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that we just announced a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, is precisely that, and it comes through the CHIPS Act. So the CHIPS Act side now of Chips and Science. This is a collaboration between my directorate and several other directorates at the National Science Foundation that have equities in semiconductor workforce development, right? So workforce development. We all recognize, everybody talks about this as a fundamental challenge, is how do we ensure that we are training talent at all levels for the myriad job types that are out there, not just researchers, but practitioners, advanced technicians as well. How do we train the talent that we're going to need in order to be able to carry forward the work that needs to happen in fabs and beyond all across this country? And so we are investing $200 million, and this is another example of partnership, right? This is a collaboration between NSF and the Department of Commerce around a national network for microelectronics education, where we can think about how do we orchestrate this at a national level, right? There's a little bit of top-down nature to this, of making sure that we're deploying assets that we have, because they're precious and few and limited, into the right locations, but at the same time also ensuring that you can participate as part of the semiconductor ecosystem, even if you don't have a fab in your backyard, right? And so this is an effort where we're hoping to have a coordination hub and then a set of regional nodes across the country and others, where the objective is how do we have lots of curriculum already. We have lots of instructional material. How do we scale that? How do we deploy that? How do we attract talent from all different backgrounds to become a part of this ecosystem, and they become a part of the virtuous cycle that we're talking about and that we need?
So today's symposium is basically looking at the role of international cooperative research organizations. What role can they play to strengthen some of these local ecosystems and the networking effects that you're talking about?
Look, I think that we all recognize, in fact, part of the motivation for Chips and Science in the first place, CHIPS in particular, was the highly interconnected supply chains that we have when it comes to semiconductors, microelectronics especially. It's one of the most highly interconnected aspects. And while we're doing everything we can to reshore semiconductor design and manufacturing here in the U.S., I think that there's also broad recognition that we need to be sure that we are collaborating with like-minded partners around harnessing that talent piece, around harnessing innovative new ideas that can be brought to bear here in the U.S. Right? So I think that this is in that sense critically important that some of the partners that I talked about, whether it be Taiwan or Korea or Japan or the EU, right? Making sure that we are building those relationships is critically important. We see it in practice with the semiconductor engine in Florida. We see it in practice with a number of the projects that we have supported and are supporting. And we have an effort in place right now where we are allowing our researchers to get access to advanced fab capabilities that might be overseas that allows them to be able to conduct the cutting edge research that needs to happen. And so I think that is part of what we are trying to ensure happens in this context.
So it's no small task. But
it's a team sport, and I think there's a lot, and it's no small task, which is also why, you gave me a lot of kind words at the outset, but I've been in government for 12 years, a little more than 12 years, and I think there is something to be said for the incredible level of coordination and collaboration that you see today across the interagency, NSF partnering with DOC, NSF partnering with DOD, DOD and DOC working together, DOE at the table. There are, and other agencies, the State Department, right? It is an interagency effort. Now, I'm sure somebody's going to get mad at me that I didn't call out their agency, but the point is that it is truly an interagency effort with different agencies bringing their respective equities to bear, and so no small task, but I think we are well positioned by virtue of who we have and how we have that collaboration taking place.
And I think the international aspect of this collaboration is also something that is important, and hopefully that
that's why I mentioned the State Department. Yeah.
Through the State Department plays an important role there as well. But a lot of what we will discover today is that there's a lot going on, below the radar in terms of just actual operational collaboration. I think that's important to recognize as well. Well, thank you so much for this. Has been a great way to set the stage.
Can I just say one other thing?
Please.
You mentioned international. We should also mention the private sector, right? So the private sector has been at the table, actively engaging, partnering with the interagency space. Yes, there's the CHIPS incentives from DOC, but they've worked with us directly, for instance, to support R&D efforts. We have a program, Future of Semiconductors, almost $80 million of investment in next generation semiconductor technologies. They've worked with us on education workforce development efforts, teacher training, professional development, et cetera. So I think that it is cross-sector and it is international with like-minded nations.
It's just remarkable to see just how much of this partnership and network are developing and at what speed, given the complexity and the stakes involved. So thank you again very
Thanks
much.
for having me.
It's been fantastic.
Great to see you.
Well, thank you all for joining us today for this esteemed panel of semiconductor experts. We will speak with these leaders, these global leaders, about their institutions, their challenges, and the promise of international collaboration in semiconductor R&D. First, I'd like to run through some introductions. We have Mr. Terry Higashi calling in from Japan. He is the chairman of the board of directors at Rapidus Corporation, as well as the LSTC. He also served as chairman and president of Tokyo Electron. And in 2020, he received the Japan National Decoration Award, the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold, and Silver Star, due to his lifetime contributions to the semiconductor industry. Thank you, Mr. Higashi, for calling in. We also have Mr. Dave Anderson, who is CEO of New York Creates and leads the State of New York semiconductor strategy. He's an industry veteran. David led Semi America as president, and he also held several president and CEO roles in the semiconductor industry. We also have Jean-René Lecapes. He leads CEA Ledi's research in Grenoble, France. Their various programs, across their various programs, he has held leadership positions there for over 30 years. He also launched CEA Ledi's Silicon Components division in 2010, and he has won France's Grand Prix for Electri-Ferry, sorry for my pronunciation, award for his work in telecommunications. We also have, and I'm very excited to share that he's joining this panel, Mr. Robert Chow, Dr. Robert Chow. He's joined NatCast 7 days ago from Intel Corporation, where he was a senior fellow and director of components research. He has won the 2021 IEEE Junichi Nishizawa Medal. He was also Intel's Inventor of the Year, and as if he had so much time on his hands, he holds more than 460 US patents. As SVP of Research for NatCast, he will develop, manage, and implement NatCast's R&D agenda. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. So we would like to start with a moment to ask you all, what is your organization's mission and what are your major semiconductor R&D programs? And I'll just share this clicker over to Jean-René. Let's start with you, Jean.
So I will make a very short presentation of overview of CLAT with some slides. So thank you for the slide. Yeah, so I'm very glad to be here today with you, and it's my great pleasure to be there. And I will try to explain what we are doing in CLAT and to make a very short overview. So first, we've been created in 1967, so we have a little bit of history. We are committed to long-term partnership and bilateral collaboration with industry based on mutual trust and also some quality of execution, because it's becoming more and more important. We have quite an important workforce of 2,000 people working full-time. And at the core of LETI, there is some state-of-the-art infrastructures for semiconductor. We have 11,000 square meters of clean room for 8 inches and 12 inches wafer size. We have a robust budget of 470 million euros, and only 15% of this budget is coming from CEA, and 85% is coming through contract. And it's a good incentive for us to work for industry and to have useful economic impact for industry. We have a patent portfolio of more than 3,000 patents, and what is important to notice is that 40% of the patent portfolio are under license with our industrial partners, and there is a very positive balance between, I would say, the revenues coming from royalties and the cost to maintain the patent portfolio. We work with a huge number of partners. Last year, more than 300 partners have been working with us, and we have been quite successful in startup creation, so 78 startups created. Next slide, please. Yeah. So our mission is very simple. We create innovation, and we have to transfer to industry in good condition in order to reduce the time to market for the introduction of new product by our industrial partners. So it's a very clear mission. And we have, I would say, 11 platforms, as you can see. Clean rooms, which is the heart of our platform, on 8 inches in width, 12 inches wafer size. We are strong in power electronics and microsystem, cybersecurity, micro-nano characterization, and we have a research hospital, which is quite unique for a research technological organization, which is a joint initiative with Grenoble Hospital in order to tackle, I would say, brain-computer interface, to tackle cancer detection, to tackle Parkinson's disease. And it's a unique feature that we have. Cybersecurity, cyber-physical system also is becoming more and more important, strongly involved in photonics since, I would say, the beginning of Leti. And telecommunication, 5G and 6G, and shortwave connectivity, and going to millimeter wave, of course. And the state-of-the-art nano-characterization platform on which we invest every year several million of euros in order to remain at the front edge of the nano-characterization technologies. And in order to make the link between, I would say, the technology and the application, we need to be quite strong in IC design in order to make some proof of concept and to develop some prototyping. So in Grenoble, it is the second industrial hub in France, and so there is a strong industrial ecosystem around us, and you could see that there is big names which are located in Grenoble, and we are part of a campus which is called Giant, on which we have 10,000 students, 10,000 people coming from industry, and 10,000 people coming from research, both fundamental research and applied research. And it's a good mix in order to work together with university, with students, with industry, in order to create value. And in this campus, there is more than 200 industrial companies which are there. So here we have our world-class facilities for your future business needs, and you could see that we have 11 baseline, and all the baseline are using, I would say, the size of wafers that is used in standard industry. So it's we use the same kind of equipment, we use the same kind of methods, and after that it's very easy and fast in order to transfer in a lab-to-fab model the result of our R&D development in order to speed up and to fill the gap between our R&D and future product, and to minimize the time to introduce new product. And it's the so-called lab-to-fab model that we push at the limit with very close collaboration with our industrial partners. In startup creation, we have been quite successful. We do not want to have, I would say, a huge number of startups, but we have successful startups on the market. So 78 startups created since 73, so more or less 3-4 startups per year. 75 of them are still in activities. And we have, I would say, more than 4,000 jobs which has been created in startup creation without counting ST Microelectronics, Soitec, and Lindred, which are big, I would say, companies now, and which are start as a startup company of us. And you could see that we have some funds and we invest in our startup. And so startup also go to VC in order to fund their development. And we leverage, I would say, more than 370 million euros since free last year in order to support the development of our startup company. As we are an applied research laboratory, we need to rely on fundamental research lab. So, and it's why it's so important for us to have, I would say, a huge amount of fundamental research lab working around us. And you could see that, of course, in Grenoble, in France, in Europe, and in the world. And for us, we have very good partnership with famous university in the US, like MIT, like UC San Diego, like Berkeley, like Stanford. And we work with them, and we are able also to send assignees on site and to propose some chair of excellence to some professor coming from US in order to exploit our baseline and to make some publication altogether. And you could see that we publish quite a lot, more than 800 patents per publication every year, 50% in major conferences in the field and 50% in journals. Here it's our, I would say, R&D priorities. And so you could see that we limit the number of priorities at around 25 in order to have the critical mass for each of them and to be able to go fast, because we are in a competing situation and time is becoming more and more important. And you could see that we tackle 3 transitions, so transition to medicine for the future, transition to digital transition, and the transition to energy transition. And so it's, if I could comment, you could see that we are strongly involved in neurotechnologies, in tools for environment and the exposome, tools for pharma and biotech technologies, device worm on the person, and also some in vivo diagnostic. Of course, I would say probably 70% of our activities is done for digital transition. And you could see that we are very strong involvement in 6G. And we have been the first to make a field test and trials in Korea during the Olympic Gate in 2018 in South Korea for 5G. And it was a world first. We are strong in microscreen, OLED and LED in order to have, I would say, more brightness and lower power consumption. And low power consumption is a very trademark of CLAT, because we think that energy efficiency is becoming more and more important. Strongly involved in photonics in different areas. We target embedded artificial intelligence because we think that it will be a very big market in the near future. Because today 80% of the data are managed and processed in the cloud, but in a limited number of years, it will be 20% only and 80% processed in the cloud, in the edge. Strongly involved in medical application, also in microsystem, and also on SOI technology, which has been born in Grenoble and mature in Grenoble to provide, I would say, low power and high performance devices. And cybersecurity is also very important, and imaging system is very important to work on consumer market, automotive market, medical market, and also security market. And of course, new computing for paradigm are also key topics, working on neuromorphic, bioinspire, quantum technology, and the so-called in-memory computing to avoid, I would say, the manipulation of data. I will stop here to leave time for the discussion, and but of course, I will be there for the lunchtime, so do not hesitate to come to me to have more information. And you are, it will be a great pleasure to welcome us, you in Grenoble for a visit of our state-of-the-art platform.
Thank you for your warm hospitality. We would all love to visit France. We'd like to also invite Mr. Higashi to talk a bit about Rapidus and the LSTC. You may be on mute.
Sorry. Thank you for the invitation. And do you show my slide? This is the image of our factory called Rapidus. And as you see here, our factory is covered by green. Green all around. And inside of the factory, it's fully utilized AI and robotics to manufacture the 2-nanometer logic device with a GAA, a gate all around. And so next, please. Next, the reason why we aim 2-nanometer geometry at the first stage is, as you see here, Japan is very behind to the leading edge world companies such as TSMC, IBM, Intel, and Samsung. They already reach 3-nanometer geometries and developing the 2-nanometer areas. But Japan still stop at the 40-nanometer, and the TSMC came to Kyushu Island and manufacture 28 and 20 nanometer, and then moved to the 16 and 12 nanometer. So as you see here, Japan is at least 10 years behind to the world. And so urgent issues for Japan is reduce too much dependence on Taiwan, and also secure advanced semis development and manufacturing capability. And also at the same time, educate people who support the semi industry is very, very important. Next, please. And in order to have the sustainable development and also human resource development, we organize, we means Japan, organize LSTC. It's an open platform for develop the technology and also develop the human resource. As you see here, in the center of the organization chart, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divisions for technology development. And also, we have innovation development. That is more oriented to the new applications. And at the same time, we have the human resource development divisions and organize the national R&D organizations and also the Japanese main universities here enlisted. And also in this organization, please note that we have the international cooperation office. And this is promote the international collaboration in the R&D area and the education area. And this is the LSTC. So Rapidus is a manufacturing company for 2 nanometer and beyond. And next, please. And this shows the collaboration partners. As you see here, New York Creates is a very important portion, and also the Imec and Leti and Fraunhofer. These are very important partners. Already have some collaboration together. And also we have the Asia nations which have engineering, design, and software capabilities. With these collaborations, we will have the sustainable development internationally together. Next, please. And this picture shows the one of the collaboration effort. At the center of the pictures is a governor of the Hokkaido area, which where the Rapidus will be established, and the factory will be completed in this end of December. And as you see here, Dave Anderson is a good partner, and we will have the good memorandum of collaboration, and we would like to have the Hokkaido Valley to have the diversified organizations for development and educations, and for the organizations for the overseas people and the domestic people. Next, please. And this shows the opportunities and challenges for the Rapidus. And one is innovation technology, and next is innovation design, and also innovation of the manufacturing. And the reason why we challenge this is not only the performance itself, but also we like to have to reduce the energy consumption rapidly, such as from the left side, we can reduce the geometry, and then we can reduce the energy consumption. And at the same time, we specialize the AI chips. And this also can reduce the energy consumption 1/5. And last is 3D packaging, and this also we estimate 1/10 reduction of the energy consumption. So we aim for the energy consumption, aim for the reduce the energy consumption, and also for the market for the specialized chip, the speed is very required. That is another purpose of our company. Next, please. In order to have the to reduce the cycle time reduction, we combine the vertical integration concept and the horizontal specialization concept together. And we have RAMS. RAMS is a Rapid Unified Manufacturing for Service. And in this, we combine the vertical integration and horizontal integration together to reduce their cycle time. Next, please. And in order to do that, we fully utilize the single wafer processes for all equipments. And as you know, the some process we used to use the batch type, but we have a lot of experiment, and now we have the confidence that we can use the single wafer process for the all process. And then we can reduce the cycle time to the 60 times less. And also, not on 60% less. And also, we can enhance the yield enhancement like the right side bottom chart. So like this, utilize the single wafer type and reduce our cycle time. Next, please. And in order to sustain collaboration, we think these 3 points are very important. One is a stabilized supply chain, and the second is a talent development together, and also the global level sustainability. And so like-minded nations collaboration is a very, very important for the sustainable development and collaborations. Next, please. And this is the present, not a present, but a September 1st situation of a factory. And this is almost 75% completion. And by the end of next week, by the end of the December, we finish it and we install the first equipments to here, and start the pilot line next April. So our movement is very quick and rapid. Thank you very much.
Now we'll move to Dave Anderson from New York Creates.
Thank you, Mary. I'll give a little brief introduction on New York Creates. You can see the photo on the right is our facility as it exists today. Creates is the largest and most advanced not-for-profit research center in the U.S. It actually is an acronym. It stands for the New York Center for Research, Economic Advancement, Technology, Engineering, and Science. While the acronym is a whole lot easier to say, it really does embody all that we do as an organization. We really have 3 elements to our mission. First and foremost is research and developing, advancing next generations of technologies. Second is workforce development, developing the workforce to support the future innovation economy. And third is economic development for the region. So we really focus on those three elements in all that we do. And in support of what's coming with the CHIPS Act, we're ready to act in any way necessary across other entities with the U.S. and globally in support of the CHIPS Act. We have about 2 decades now, a little bit more of sustainable operations. And what I mean by that is all of our annual operating dollars come from partnerships with industry. We don't receive any government support on an annual operating basis. And it really does, those partners leverage shared facilities. So it tremendously reduce the cost of access to leading edge technologies such as lithography for all of those partners on a shared basis. Over the 20-year history, we've had about $20 billion invested by industry in programs that have operated through our site. And that's been leveraged by about $3 billion of state investment. So through 5 different governors of both parties, the state has recognized the strategic importance of semiconductor technology and the research and development activities that support the broader ecosystem across the state, and has been willing to make that commitment over time to invest in capital refresh to programs and technologies at our site. We have about 1.6 million square feet of office, labs, and fabs in the Albany Nanotech Complex, 150,000 square feet of existing clean room space, and we're currently under construction on an additional 50,000 square feet of clean room. We work internationally with about 200 plus industry partners, large and small. Of course, the largest of which are partners of IBM, Tokyo Electron, Applied Materials, ASML, Lam Research, and so forth. But we work with dozens of startups and many medium-sized enterprises. Our annual operating budget is about $400 million, and as I mentioned, that's all from work with industry programs. Each of those partners are investing far more than that in the site on an annual basis. We are host to the AIM Photonics Manufacturing Institute, part of the Manufacturing USA program, and the hub for the DoD Microelectronics Commons, NORDTech, the Northeast Technology Center for those hubs. We have about 2,700 and growing on-site research and engineers from industry, government, and academia. From academia, on-site, we have the State University of New York, University of Albany, CNSE program, as well as RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, with classroom and offices on site. And we have a little over 1,200 visitors every month coming to visit the site to engage with the researchers on site. As I mentioned, we are under construction of 50,000 square feet. It's a little washed out, but you can see the white rendering on the top of the slide is a new high-NA EUV center. We began construction in May, and we're starting to pour concrete in about a week on the foundation, and will be completed by the end of 25, beginning of 26, to move in a high-NA EUV ASML tool. This is $1 billion investment from New York State, $500 to build the building, and $500 to purchase the high-NA tool and the other surrounding tools to enable the high-NA center. But that's leveraging an additional $9 billion from industry over the next 10 years. So as New York has provided some seed funding to programs in the past, they're doing this here again to continue the growth of the Albany Nanotech Complex in support of the ecosystem across the state. And as we support that ecosystem, we really do that through collaborative R&D, through direct industry and academic engagements, joint development agreements amongst our partners and us. We've hosted several consortium activities on site and continue to do that. We do it through public-private partnerships, through government investment, particularly from the state of New York, but also the AIM Photonics program, DoD Commons, and other programs that we've done. Shared access is really the key to this model. It enables labs and clean room, advanced tooling, prototyping capabilities, testing of devices, all at a fractional cost to the users. And of course, the focus on education and workforce development is clearly one of the key focus areas that we have. If you look at the technologies we're engaged with, much like our other partners around the globe, we're engaged in everything from very next generation advanced logic technologies, memory applications, novel memory applications, looking at power electronics, photonics, and as we go forward, looking at different novel memory applications, neuromorphic computing, quantum technologies, and bio devices, all focused on how do we do that sustainably for the future. When we look at workforce development, we have internship programs, apprenticeship programs, we have co-op programs. We work very closely with universities, but we also work with the exiting veterans coming out of the military service with a program called VetStep, where in the last year of their service, they come on site, train hands-on in our facility and again with our industry partners, and a very high success rate of someone being a helicopter mechanic one day and working on an applied materials tool in the fab the next. So we're really focused on a broad engagement across industry, government, and academia to support workforce for the future. We also are working very closely with our partners. As you'll see today, we have partnerships with CEA-Leti, with Imec, with Fraunhofer, and in many applications across all the allied nations, as Terry mentioned earlier, engaging with Hokkaido and the Rapidus team, and we continue to broaden those relationships with our international partners. Because as we look forward, we all agree that we have boundless opportunities for semiconductor industry in the future in many different areas, but with that comes challenges, and those challenges, particularly around sustainability, energy reduction, new materials development, and product development architectures, those require cooperation across industry, and that's appropriate for the conversation today and why we're here talking to each other. If we do that, then I think it collectively strengthens our technology capabilities across each participating nation. It creates a more robust and diversified semiconductor supply chain, and it ensures that we develop and maintain the technologies needed for national defense and national security across the allied nations, and ultimately leads to shared economic benefits and strategic stability for our allied regions. And so with that, I will turn it over to Marion.
So, Dr. Chow, can you talk a little bit about NatCast?
Sure.
Without slides.
No slides, so I'll be talking to you face to face. So first of all, it's really a great honor and privilege for me to be part of the NatCast team in driving the semiconductor R&D leadership for our nation, for the United States of America. This is a great honor for me. Before I joined NatCast, before I joined NSTC, I actually spent 2.5 years in Europe. In fact, I just come back from Europe 2 weeks ago, and I was the director, Intel director of Europe research, and I was based out of Imec. And during the 2.5 years, I worked extremely closely with my colleagues here, my good friend here, and from Grenoble, CEA-Leti. So I worked closely with them on technology like advanced SOI, 2D materials, layer transfer, right? So we formed a very strong partnership. And I don't know whether I have colleagues from Germany, so I work very closely with Fraunhofer on 3D heterogeneous integration. And of course, I work very closely with my colleagues from Imec on CMOS scaling, continue to drive CMOS, Moore's law, actually Moore's law scaling. So I can tell you my experience in the importance of international collaboration. Now, coming back to NatCast, to NSTC, and we know, we all know here that NSTC is a private-public consortium, and NatCast, and NatCast stands for National Center for the Advancement of Semiconductor Technology, and we are a purpose-built nonprofit entity designed to operate the NSTC by the Department of Commerce. And we really have 3 goals. Number one, the first goal is the drive to reestablish, to drive, and to extend U.S. semiconductor technology. That's our number one goal. We want to extend our technology leadership here in the United States on semiconductor technology. The second goal is we want to work very closely with our members, the NSTC members, to reduce the time and cost to bring innovation from lab to fab, meaning from conception to product. You know, we want to really use our know-how and work closely with our colleagues, work together as a team, and to help actually innovators to bring innovations from concept to product. We want to accelerate the cycle, reduce the time, and so that's our second goal. And then the third goal is we want to build a really robust, strong workforce, and I call it the talent pipeline. We want to have a very strong talent pipeline here in the United States. Now, let me finish by saying that we know we really have the determination to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the States, back to our home, but we need R&D to go with it. We need very strong R&D infrastructure across the United States to support all this manufacturing. We need very strong innovation pipeline. That means we need R&D. And we need to excite students to come to the semiconductor field. We need very strong talent workforce pipeline. And then come back to R&D, because when you go to universities, right? You go to Purdue University, for example, you have to tell students, hey, why would you want to come to the field? Because, you know, this is exciting. You know, with AI, with data center, with all these wonderful technologies, and together we're going to define the future. That's what we want to tell students. So those are the three goals of NSTC, and I look forward to working very closely with my colleagues from the government, like NIST, DOE, DOC, and my colleagues in industry, whether it's like companies like Intel, like IBM, Qualcomm, Micron, right? I want to work closely with them, and the suppliers like Applied Material, Lam, and I want to work closely with academia, because students are very important. You talk about pipeline, that's the source of our pipeline. You have to start with students. So that's my speech. All right, thank you, and look forward to working with every one of you.
So now we'll have a little bit of a conversation. So I want to ask you all, in your scientific experience, what are the rewards of international collaboration? And what do you all see as some of the challenges? So Robert, maybe we can start with you, since you just came back from an international scientific collaboration role.
Yeah, it's really very important and highly rewarding. So when I was in Europe, I get the privilege to work with the European RTOs. RTO stands for Research Technology Organization. And so, for example, I come to Leti, work with my colleagues in Leti, and they're really good at a lot of things. And then I talk to Sebastian, I talk to you, the CTO, and they say, hey, let's work together and focus on, let's call it a big bet item. Because when you talk about collaboration, in order to be fruitful, in order to be meaningful, you can't work on everything. You have to pick one topic that we truly believe that is important, right? And I believe we pick like 2D materials, layer transfer, which is relevant to your SOI technology. Very important for them. They focus on SOI, but it's also important for Moore's law. Ultimately, the physics is the same. How you scale SOI versus how we scale silicon devices, same physics, same electrostatics. So it's really a common goal. But we collaborate, and together we really want to really accelerate the progress. Something with actually Fraunhofer, and when I work with Fraunhofer, they're good at many things. But again, I want to do one thing, right, and focus on it. And they're good at packaging. Of course, they're good at materials. And then we decide to focus on 3D heterogeneous integration, because that's a bridge between materials, wafer processing, and panel processing. So together, we come up with a 3D heterogeneous integration, which become part of their pilot line proposal, and it's really very exciting. And then with Imec, it's very obvious. Imec is really pioneer in scaling. They've been really at the front end of driving Moore's law. So when I work with them, I say, wow, there's a lot of things, but let's focus on one thing which the industry will need most. So what's beyond the nanoribbon fab, which will be in production this year or next year? Stack transistors, right? When you stack the nanoribbon, and that's what they call CFAB. But saying to do CFAB is one thing, but how you connect those wires is extremely difficult. I mean, every company will do it differently, right? And we have to prove that the CFAB concept is correct. And this is still in the well, right now it's in pathfinding, but it's pre-competitive 2 years ago. So I talked to my colleagues, Luke and people, and say, hey, let's focus on driving CFAB, making sure that we prove the concept, we prove the practicality. So that's a kind of collaboration, and which is extremely important. It accelerates the research cycle, and it's pre-competitive, and everybody brings something very powerful to the table, and it's good for the community, good for the ecosystem.
Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I think actually Higashi-san showed a very good chart that showed the evolution of the industry from vertical integration to where we are today. And I think throughout that evolution, we've recognized the challenges we face in next generation technologies, new materials, sustainability, energy consumption are challenges certainly no one company can address together. But I think we're finding that no one region can really address all the challenges we have. We are such an intricately engaged supply chain in the semiconductor industry that we need to work together. And I think the more cooperation we have, it provides a faster return on those investments. It utilizes the best capabilities where they reside and enables us to accelerate the technology development that is required by our rapidly changing industry. And I think that all of these engagements are extremely important.
And Jean-Rene, you recently attended the G7 meeting on semiconductor technology. Yes. Could you share with us what you gathered about collaboration from that meeting? Were there any particular goals that jumped out?
The meeting has been organized at G7 members, so in order to identify priority for research. And so at the beginning, each nation, each state, and RTOs proposed 5 ideas. And after that, the second meeting, it's only 2 ideas. And at the end, it was a very good exchange in order to see what are the conditions in order to cooperate. And the condition is that we need to have some funding which are coming from each other in order to bring, I would say, some value to the cooperation. To manage the IP rules also and future exploitation, it's mandatory also. And to have win-win collaboration between parties, because we can collaborate if there is not, I would say, someone which is subcontracting to another one. And we need to be both together going fast thanks to cooperation and international cooperation. So at the end, 2 topics have been selected. So energy efficiency, which is a very important topic for the future because we know that we have to reduce power consumption of our electronic chips, and sustainable manufacturing for electronic chips. And it's also very important topics. And so those 2 topics are, I would say, paves the way to future collaboration between us if we decide to go in that direction. So what I don't know what will be the political decision at the end for G7 when those projects will come on the table for discussion. But I hope that there will be open the door to some cooperation between us in order to strengthen our link, because the world of semiconductor is becoming so complex, so that we need to gather all the skills, and we have all our strengths and our weaknesses, and so we need to be able to work on our strengths, and in order to compensate our weaknesses, thanks to partners bringing, I would say, what we are not good at. And it's becoming very important because I agree that no one can master all the value chain of semiconductor going from materials to software and to applications. So there is a huge, broad spectrum, and we need to work together in order to speed up development, to explore more topics, to go fast, and to invest less money for each of us.
So last question for the group. The whole world is suddenly focused on artificial intelligence. So that is such a huge topic and impacts every level of technology. Can you share with us your all's insight on your institution's role in helping advance AI hardware or AI R&D? Dave?
Yeah, sure. We have a strong focus on developing next generation logic technologies, embedded memory, advanced packaging capabilities for current, next generations of AI, edge AI, and other applications. In 2019, we established with our partners, particularly IBM, the AI Hardware Center. We're focused on die-to-wafer, wafer-to-wafer, heterogeneous integration, stacking to support many different generations and applications for AI. So clearly, looking not just at the technologies embedded in the devices themselves, but stacking and combining the heterogeneous devices for future applications in general.
Great. Robert, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so at NetCast, before I joined NetCast, they have actual workshops, work with industry, academia, our government partners, and talk about what we should be focusing on. And we all know AI, right? It uses a lot of energy. We have to do something about it, right? AI is still in its infancy. So in order to continue to grow AI, to enable AI, let's say for 2035, you need to really solve the energy efficient problem. And energy efficiency is a big deal, is one of the topmost, I would say, problem that we need to resolve. Whether you solve it by coming up with low energy devices, a different switch, right, or another feature beyond CFAT that is more energy efficient. And those are the research topics that we need to tackle. And NetCast is really, we want to lead that effort, working with all of you and drive solution. The other one, of course, we heard about memory, the memory war. We all know we need a lot of memory. So we need to work with our memory experts in the nation and also globally, and really to break that wall. And then you talk about sustainability, although it's not directly to AI, but we have to do technology in a very responsible manner. We have to worry about the environment, right? We need to make sure we come up with all these devices that are green, meaning low energy. We need to make sure that from the manufacturing side, we have to make sure we will reduce those PFAS. I don't know whether we have PFAS in our water, but as an industry, it's our responsibility.
Yeah.
We have to we have to come up with a solution to reduce the amount of PFAS in our environment, or for that matter, any harmful chemicals in our environment. So sustainability, energy, memory war, among other things, right? So those are the things that NetCast would want to work with all of you, work with our partners. Together we will accelerate the progress.
Terry first.
Yeah.
Mr. Higashi,
I will
Dr.
give the floor to Terry first.
Do you have any thoughts? Dr. Higashi?
Me?
Yes.
Regarding the AI? Yes, of course. Now, in the past, AI is also very general purpose. But nowadays, it's going to the more specialized AI for each applications, penetrated to each area of the overall life. And so the promotion of the AI, especially for the specialized AI, is very, very important. And in order to do that, of course, the manufacturing way should be different. And also, we need to, establish how effectively concentrate on each specialized functions, and at the same time, we can save the energy consumption. That is so. So we are highly involved in this movement in the manufacturing devices and also creating the applications. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So at Leti, what we do in AI, we work in two directions. So AI in the cloud, but we have not the force and the resource to big chips, big GPU chips, of course. So we provide only technology we could help, like photonic links, like 3D technology, like non-volatile memories, which can be useful, and power devices in order to lower the power consumption of future data centers or to increase the power computing, so reaching the same global power consumption of the data center at 20 megawatt, for example. On Edge AI, we are providing, I would say, a full solution on neuromorphic and bio-inspired solution based on the mimic of our brain with synapse and neurons, and to try to go in that direction in order to win, I would say, a very important factor in terms of power reduction. And we have a gain of 3 decades of power consumption reduction thanks to such kind of approach. And we need for that, I would say, 3D approach, because our brain is 3D with, I would say, smart connection. We need non-volatile memory to emulate synapse and neurons behavior. We need low power consumption, like fully depleted SOI, and we need to make in-memory computing in a digital way or analog way in order to lower the power consumption as much as possible, because there we are targeting, I would say, 1 milliwatt or some tenths of milliwatt compared to several hundreds of watts in the cloud. So it's a totally different areas, and we think that this area is very promising because thanks to Edge AI, we have 5 main advantages. We reduce the network bandwidth, which is needed. We can go to low latency, which is very important for the automotive market. We have a much lower power consumption, 3 decades of gain. We protect our own data, and we have also an advantage to not to rely on a cloud connection, which is sometimes missing. So I think that there is 2 kinds of Edge AI, and I think that the videos that will be shown now illustrate one way of Edge AI, what could do Edge AI.
Before we jump to the video, I'd like, as technologists, we all answered with what types of technologies are we developing, but I think it's important to also state that we're embracing AI in the factory through digital twins of the tools of the line of the factory for, future efficiencies as well as accelerating the cycles of learning and developing the technologies we just spoke of. So.
Thank you, Dave, for that.
Yeah, and I want to echo what they said. Like ElecCast, they just launched a AI assist RF design. They just use AI to help the designers to speed up all this RF, the integrated circuit design to speed up the cycle. Yeah, that's exactly what David just talked about. The application of AI in manufacturing and in some of this like circuit design, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this panel. We're just going to wrap up now with a video that shows the impact of semiconductor R&D on the day-to-day life of somebody who really needed some help. So.
I have a spinal cord injury at C5, C6, and recently I've been implanted by a brain-spine interface. Here's an example. I can start the stim with my brain. I can talk while doing it. It's freedom, which I didn't have before.
A spinal cord injury interrupts the communication between the brain and the region of the spinal cord that produces walking, leading to paralysis. Here we enabled an individual with chronic tetraplegia to stand and walk naturally in community settings by restoring this communication with a digital bridge that converts thoughts into actions. This brain-spine interface consists of fully implanted recording and stimulation systems that establish a direct link between cortical signals and the analog modulation of epidural electrical stimulation of the spinal cord. Spatial, temporal, and spectral features are extracted from the raw signals by continuous wavelet transform. The brain features are fed into a 2-layer decoding algorithm that predicts the intended movement of each joint and the related amplitude of the movement. A hidden Markov layer ensures the stability and robustness of predictions. This adaptive algorithm enables real-time and iterative calibration to control up to 6 different leg movements.
The most surprising thing, I think, happened after 2 days. Within 5 to 10 minutes, I could control my hips. The brain implant picked up what I was doing with my hips, so that was like the best outcome, I think, for everyone. The difference between STIMO and the BSI is with STIMO I make a small movement to trigger an event. With BSI, I think about the movement, so I can maintain my leg in the air. I can make turns with it, it's much easier. So the big difference is that my brain controls the stimulation. And I think from this point I can really build functional things from it. So to just an example, I'm training 10 years to stand up with a friend having a beer. And that's something I think people don't realize. I would always say that it's the best opportunity you can get if you're having like a spinal cord injury, and if I would meet somebody that really is motivated, I would say then go for it.
We're very happy that you're able to see us because we basically can't see you. And we have a challenge here. You know the old joke, you should never try and follow a really good act. And I thought that the first panel was really outstanding, and thank our French colleagues for showing us that brief film about the applications, the real-life applications of how you can transform people's lives through these technologies. It's very rich. They also talked a lot about the need for deep cooperation and for heavy investments and for public-private partnerships. And I have here on my right Raj Jame, who is president of U.S. operations for Imec. Imec is, if I may briefly, is really probably one of the foremost centers, if not the foremost center of R&D in the semiconductor space, and indeed moving into other spaces. When I was at the National Academy of Sciences some time ago, we actually went out to visit Imec to try and understand what they were doing. And we left very impressed. But one of the startling differences is that Imec is in Belgium, although they would tell us it's in Flanders. And they have a remarkable installation, but they have no national champion. So our question was, well, why do they do this? Well, fast forward 15 years later, I don't think anyone asks now why Imec does what it does. And with that, let me introduce Dr. Jame to present Imec.
Thank you, Chuck. And if I may.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. First and foremost, I wanted to thank CSIS for organizing this very, very topical discussion, as well as Sujay and Chuck and your team for inviting us here. So it is an honor to be here, and it's a great opportunity for us to share what we do at Imec and what our vision is for how we could be coming together to partner. So I think they made the mistake of telling me, an engineer, to use slides. So you're all in trouble now. You're going to see a lot of slides from me, but just kidding. I feel that collaboration is the key to fuel any innovation that we are all embarking on. So if you look at, I'll come back to this slide, this colorful thing, but if you look at who Imec is, and I think Chuck gave a brief introduction of what Imec does, but we are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And in the past 40 years, I think Imec has now become a preeminent place where semiconductor R&D, as well as some system R&D, takes place. We have the benefit of 5,500 plus sharp minds working with us on a daily basis, with about 800 or so partner company assignees embedded into our activities and programs. We also have about 200 plus universities working worldwide with us, and 600 or so university students embedded into our programs as well. So as you can see here, it's a combination of things that we do: workforce development, technology development, as well as input from the industry, all coming together to make who we are. So today we are about $1 billion USD in terms of revenue, and 75% of that comes from industry support. We still do enjoy the benefit of steady government support, and you'll see that in more detail in coming charts. But this is where we are today. Our infrastructure, I think we've invested more than 4 billion plus euros in our infrastructure. But if you look at it from a different perspective, I think the state of Flanders and EU have been very benevolent. And over the years, I did some back-of-the-envelope calculation. It probably runs into tens of billions of what they have put into, and along with the companies who have worked with us, it probably runs into tens of billions. But I think one other key factor that I wanted to stress over here is we have become a trusted partner for the industry as well as for much of the ecosystem. And part of it is because of our neutrality and not-for-profit status. So these two have made it. And we also enjoy independence from, I would say, both government as well as from any influence that a tactical position an industry would try to push forward. So that gives us a lot of strength. And so that's what really made us who we are. And if I go back to this colorful picture of Leuven, what I wanted to highlight here is besides those 300 millimeter, 200 millimeter fabs that you see in the chart, on the left-hand side where there is the Leuven, Belgium text written, a new facility, a new fab is going to be built there. We are blessed with about 2.5 billion euros of investment coming from EU as well as Flanders to continue this legacy and build another fab that would focus on 2 nanometers and beyond technology development. And of course, industry is putting in approximately $1 billion, so the total comes to about 2.5 billion. So the construction of that hopefully will be starting very soon. Maybe in a couple of years, we will have a different landscape over there. So with that backdrop, let me just jump ahead and talk about Imec itself as a global presence and a global force that we have presence in many, many countries as well as in the United States specifically. And I want to start with the headquarters. And I think back in 2016, we started working with the Holst Center in Netherlands. And we have some capabilities and researchers in Eindhoven as well as Wageningen. But more so, I think even longer than that, we have been in the United States. Most of our partnerships and also collaborations come from US. I think we've had a facility and researchers in US West Coast for quite a while, both in San Francisco, Berkeley, as well as in San Jose now. But also on the East Coast, we have, I think since 2016, we have been in Florida. I think Erwin mentioned about the partnership in Central Florida that we enjoy, and that is since 2016. Now, more recently, we also opened a collaborative relationship with Purdue University in Indiana, as well as in Michigan, in Ann Arbor with University of Michigan, which is focused on automotives, and the relationship in Purdue University is focused on materials, packaging technologies, and others. But you can see that there are other facilities in Japan, Taiwan, as well as in India and other locations that we have around the world. Now, in terms of revenue, as I mentioned, we have been blessed with steady support that comes from the government. Of course, it doesn't show very clearly on the chart here, but hopefully you can see that the bottom light blue is the support that we enjoy from the government. It is to the tune of about 150 million euros today out of a total budget of about 920 million euros. That's roughly 75% of our budget is coming from industry and the rest from various government programs and sources. Jumping ahead, this is our facilities in Leuven. I have a small video here that might be of interest to you. Let me see if I click, it'll work.
Defining the semiconductor technology roadmap by performing cutting-edge research on materials, device concepts, and process steps, and by making these innovations industry-ready. To develop technology that's years ahead of current manufacturing standards, Imec offers its partners a 300mm clean room that contains more than 200 advanced tools and where more than 500 professionals work 24/7. The capabilities in Imec's cleanroom include the world's most advanced patterning equipment and state-of-the-art etching, implant, cleaning, and deposition equipment from leading OEMs. In our Atto lab, we perform fundamental research into high numerical aperture EUV lithography. Imec's 300.
We decided to truncate it because it goes on for quite a while. But that is the tower or office tower that Imec researchers are based in. We are out of space, so we are constructing an additional tower to accommodate the researchers and our staff with the new building as well. Now, while I did show you about Imec and what we do at Imec, and the world map, I think one of the important things to stress is that over the years, more than 40 years almost through our existence, we've had partnerships and collaborative relationships with our European colleagues as well as from Fraunhofer or from CELAT and other facilities as you see in Netherlands. But we've also enjoyed those partnerships in US as well quite a bit, and that includes CREATES and other entities across the US. Now, one of the reasons why we've been doing this is because Imec's belief has always been, how do you take innovation and translate it to something that the commercial industry can use? That translation is what we do. That is our role. That's our mission. That's what we play. But as we do that, we just simply can't do that alone. We have to involve the equipment side of the industry or the supplier community of the industry, because that solution space where innovation goes through supplier community and gets solidified is where we excel. But you can't do that just for the sake of supplying it to a commercial industry that already exists. You always have to think about industry that is going to come in the near future, the startup community. How do you lower the barriers so that the startup community can also benefit and enjoy these fruits? And this has been the modus operandi for Imec for a very long time. Now, one thing that we've been able to do is to take a very linear transition of technology from, you get an idea, you talk to material supplier, to go to equipment supplier, and so on. We just changed this model. We made this model more elegant by having all the participants and all the, I would say, stakeholders sit at the table so that they could understand each other's problems and how to design around those problems so that you can get a solution much faster. And this has really been, this networked innovation model has been really beneficial, and we've put this to practice even with our collaboration partners outside Imec facilities as well. Now, what might be interesting is that this kind of partnership has actually led us to attract participants from across the ecosystem. So what you see here is the chip makers who are partners, or what we call core partners, and Rapidus, of course, is a partner now as well. But we also have some of the IDMs like Infineon and NXP and others who are working on specific technologies. But we also have a number of companies from the system maker side, as well as the design houses of system makers and equipment makers, material suppliers, and also system partners. So when you look at these partnerships, how they have blossomed over the years and how we are benefiting from the input that they all provide has been really valuable in moving us forward. Now, for all these partners, we offer different types of collaborative engagements because no one size doesn't fit all. We have to ensure that we are indeed working with their needs, not with what we just offer. So what we do is we do a lot of pre-competitive R&D that is collaborative. But we also provide bilateral R&D where people can come in and say, I want to take a specific idea forward in a closed and a very secure mode. And we help them prototype sometimes, and we also help them do low volume sampling of parts as necessary. So it's a cycle that we have to go through, and in some cases, and that's what we help our partnerships with. But to do this more I think I would say more recently, probably for the past 10 years or so now, we have established IC Link, which provides mostly design services, but also some packaging services. So this facility or this group has the right staff, but it also has the right partnership to run MPWs as well as wafer runs and ASIC designs with TSMC, UMC, and other companies that you see out there. Now, one thing that I wanted to touch upon as a topic for discussion today is the global supply chain is intricately linked. Each region has very, very unique strengths. And I think Dave was echoing the same point from New York Creates earlier when we were discussing. The supply chain intricacy is, in my opinion, it's very difficult to undo. In fact, it's probably not safe to undo. What is more important is we need to coordinate and provide the right R&D tools for the supply chain. Most nations have gone out there and said, we're going to do a CHIPS Act ourselves. So what does it really mean? How are we just simply going to do the same thing over and over again across the globe, or are we just going to coordinate this so that we are going to have much better outcomes? And I think it became very clear earlier today. I think maybe Dana was saying this. The problem set is huge. So resources, on the other hand, are limited. So are we going to be able to bifurcate, or not bifurcate, I should say, split this problem set in front of us and do parallel processing? The chips that we use have multi-threaded operations today. Well, can we not just simply do multi-threaded operations and then get the research done as well? So allied nations definitely have to collaborate, and I don't see any other way to avoid resource dilution or successful outcomes. If we do not collaborate, we don't at our own peril. And that is, of course, exacerbated with the fact that geopolitical tensions are at an all-time high right now. And if we, I think, only together can we be successful. So if you look at that, I think it becomes very clear that the kind of R&D we do today is no longer possible in one single fab. If you think about it, a new concept or an idea is best suited for a flexible facility like a university, or to some extent even national labs. So ideas come out from such facilities. At that stage, you want to take them through proof of concept. Once the proof of concept is established, then you want to say, okay, now, is this really relevant for manufacturing? Is this something that people can practice? So that's where you need to go to an industrially relevant facility and solidify that, maybe 300 millimeter tools. Do I have the right design kits possible? Do I have the right metrology solutions, etc.? Once that happens, now the question pops up, is this ready for manufacturing? If I put all this together, do I still have the original promise that I started with? So that manufacturing relevance is very, very important. And then finally, how do I transfer this to manufacturing? Because I need to worry about yield, I need to worry about things that a factory really concerns itself with. So this life cycle is extremely critical, and no one fab, no one region actually can solve all these problems for a new technology to come to life. So this is something that we need to keep in our mind. As you saw today, I mean, as we all are gathered over here, multiple facilities across the planet in allied countries, I think this is an opportunity for us to come together and use approaches like split fab approaches and sharing and common programs that we can split and run in different parts where our strengths might be, and also back each other up. If one facility comes down, or if one facility has a one-of-a-kind tool that is in high demand, how are we going to be able to duplicate those tools and those capabilities so that we can move faster? I think that's going to be a very essential thing. Now, these are all various programs that we do in Imec. It's probably clear for you to read. In the interest of time, I am going to move forward. But I think Imec, over the years, we have established ourselves as a very reliable partner, trusted partner, and I think there is a great opportunity for partnerships within these allied community, where I think with our experience, with what we've been doing over the years, we can provide a running start. Some of these things don't have to be developed from ground zero. And the neutrality also helps in attracting additional partners. And our focus in the CHIPS Act has always been, how do you lower the barriers for the industrial community as well as for the startup community? And this is something that we've been doing, and we would love to do that with all partners. I think the models are very effective, they're proven, and we have a number of engagements today that prove how Imec works and how it has successfully enabled a number of companies, as well as we have demonstrated our technology leadership. Now, I think I've probably said most of the things that I just said in the previous slide here, but I think one critical point that I want to highlight is that Imec has always been focused on ensuring that local funding is spent locally. It's not in our interest to take money and move it across the Atlantic or move it into different regions. It is important that when you are entrusted with resources from a local entity, you spend it for the benefit of the local region and entity. That's what we've been very successfully doing. And there's a lot of IP, there's a lot of know-how that Imec is more than happy to bring to US or to other partners in Europe as well that we've been doing, and accelerate our collective interests. So I thought this quote is very appropriate for what we have to do and what is in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great quote. I think it's something we need to take to our heart even more than in the past, particularly in these, if I may use the euphemism, these somewhat turbulent times. But there are a number of questions, but I think we'll, in the interest of time and a chance to get everyone out, why don't we turn to Fraunhofer in the form of Patrick Bressler, who's the executive director of their microelectronics group. It might amuse some of you to know that when again at the National Academies, we were referring to Fraunhofer at one point to a group of senior administration officials, and the general question was, what's Fraunhofer? And there's a certain irony to that, in that I think Dave would agree with me that New York Creates was essentially founded on a Fraunhofer model. One of the really interesting things is that New York had the good sense to go look at a center of excellence and basically copy that model, and which then proved out to be extremely successful. And then when the Manufacturing USA initiative began under the direction of Dr. Phil Singerman here, who played an absolutely crucial role in bringing that forward. It's actually, in a sense, a compliment to Dana as well. These things don't appear into the fabric of our institutional network. So, from the head of Zeus, I mean, there's quite a lot of breathing and pushing and so on to bring them forward. But there again, the Manufacturing USA was modeled directly on Fraunhofer, and it's in my view, it's an inspiration by its scale and by its enduring legacies and its continued ability to innovate. But let me let someone who knows a great deal more about it than I introduce you to the Fraunhofer.
Thank you
Patrick.
very much. I also want to thank Sanjay and Charles for organizing this event, and CSIS, of course. This is a very interesting panel, and it's kind of, I would agree, it's kind of like hard after hearing Imec, after hearing the previous panel, to jump in and illustrate Fraunhofer. Maybe if I could get the slides.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is show you a brief, give you the concept of the Fraunhofer model, which is very, to put it bluntly, it's un-American, but it's very successful. And,
exactly.
And in a previous life or so, I ran the Fraunhofer USA centers. So there are Fraunhofer USA centers even there. At my time, there were 7 of them distributed all over the US. Come on, let's move. Let's see. Okay, maybe to kick it off, how do you start this story? The Fraunhofer Gesellschaft is the official body. It's actually a twin from the administrative structure to the Max Planck Society. If you know the Max Planck Society, it's a society dedicated to the advancement of fundamental research. Fraunhofer's subtitle is it's dedicated, a society dedicated to the advancement of applied sciences and applied research. And we're looking at a scale from basic research on the left to the commercial product on the right side, and the TRLs in between. You can see this is the German landscape of non-university or research organizations. So the Helmholtz Gemeinschaft, which they run the large research infrastructures, the free electron lasers, synchrotrons, and whatever. Then there's Leibniz that does a lot with basically public education a lot, and some very specialized institutes. Then the Max Planck, I've already mentioned, and then Fraunhofer starts later in this TRL scale, and will go up to as close as possible to the market. So we're sitting in this gap, or what people used to call, or still call, the valley of death. And Fraunhofer itself, then, it was founded in 1949, actually with Marshall funds, and in Bavaria, and it was a Bavarian state minister who came up with the idea, if you're in a society for applied research, we don't care about your publications, your patents, how many PhDs. The only thing we care about is, does industry pay you? And so that's the key driver and the key unique selling point of Fraunhofer. Do the institutes have industrial customers and contracts? And the Fraunhofer model, which I said was un-American, is simply if in year 1 you get an industrial contract of, say, just to put a number, $1 million, That alone guarantees next year, in year 2, $1 million funding from the federal government. So if you're an institute director, and you see the institutes, these are 76 or 80 institutes all over Germany, the density kind of reflects the population density in Germany as well, if I look at it now. But if you're a smart institute director, all these institutes are their own profit center. They have to manage their own budget, they have to run their own facilities, and if you're smart, you'll take those $1 million you're getting for next year and put it into pre-competitive technology development and advancement, because what you need is industrial contracts. So your big question is, what capabilities do I need next year or in 5 years to be able to get industrial contracts? And that makes you really a kind of an actor and a server into industry. Before I come to the microelectronics group, today Fraunhofer is 75 years old, so it's 30,000 or over 30,000 staff, 76 so institutes, 3 billion euros basic research, or not basic, but research funding, and the model is dedicated to the SMEs in Europe. It started with being SMEs and companies in Germany, but now within the European Union. The idea is that we provide industrial services, research and technology development services to the industries. This is linked to the international business, so we also have Fraunhofer USA, we have Fraunhofer Chile, Fraunhofer Singapore, centers, and in Europe, in Sweden, Portugal, Italy, Austria, and in the UK. And they all have their specific reason for existence, a technology in photonics or in bio. So the spectrum is very broad. And I'm going to talk about microelectronics, but the Gesellschaft itself is covering almost all fields you can think of. I think in the bottom I have the 9 groups. So all of these institutes have to go into one of these groups. And you can see the groups, and one of the groups, green marked, if I see it from here, is the microelectronics. These institutes all then address their specific field. And you could say something like 90% of the projects from Fraunhofer are with SMEs and small companies and make up 10% of the industrial income. And 90% of the industrial income come from the big companies and that make up maybe 10%, 5 to 10% of the customers. So now if I go to the microelectronics group itself, this is a small subsection of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft. These are 11 institutes with 5 so-called guest institutes. These are institutes that aren't primarily in microelectronics, but they have big divisions and departments that do research on MEMS or other very closely linked topics. So they are invited as guests. This Fraunhofer subgroup, microelectronics, has around 4,000 employees or 2,500 scientific and engineer staff, and an annual budget of roughly 600 here, so 550 to 600. 43% of that is industrial contracts. So the group itself is above the average in Fraunhofer. I spoke about the 3 billion euros and this Fraunhofer model. That pans out to basically 1/3 industrial contracts, 1/3 is in the federal base funding next year round, and the last third is open competitions, calls, and individual contracts with public sources, EU sources, whatever. In the case of the Fraunhofer Microelectronics Group, the industrial contracts amount to 43%, so it's above the average there. They're also distributed all over Germany, and we have 9 clean rooms in total, something around 19,000 square meters, so maybe 180,000 square feet clean rooms, 200 and 300 millimeters. The 300 millimeter business is focused in Dresden. And now I come to the Research Fab Microelectronics Germany real quick. If you take all of the applied research institutes in Germany that do microelectronics research, you will have the 11 Fraunhofer institutes and you will have 2 Leibniz institutes. And so these 2 together, the 13 now, the blue ones are the Leibniz institutes, make up all of the applied research institutes in Germany outside of the university that do research and technology development. So this was founded in 2017 as an alliance. It's not a legal body. It was kicked off with a 350 million euros investment CapEx scheme to get these institutes also then to work together and to be in one unity. And since then, this is an example of some of the projects. So you see from mobility, the topics, communication, security, and some of the projects that have been done in the last 5 years, from this mini LIDAR to V electronics, which is about secure and safe electronics. All of these projects are roughly around 20 to 40, 50 million euros, except for the QNC, the FMD QNC one, which is a 90 million euro project. So the next step is with the European Chips Act and the pilot lines that the European Commission has put up for funding, and there are 4 of them. So one is the microelectronics, is the nano IC pilot line of Imec, where partially funded, the 2.5 billion, I think 1.4 billion are within this project. There's the LETI FAMES project for FDSOI, and then there's this CPL3 was the pilot line number 3 in this scheme of the European Chips Act, which is led by Fraunhofer, 740 million euros. And this is Fraunhofer with the Leibniz Institutes, VTT in Finland, INL, that are setting up labs and parts for this facility. And then we have the partners, Imec and LETI, of course, on board, and universities at the bottom as the partners in this. The pilot line itself wants to cover the focus on advanced packaging and 3D or heterogeneous integration. It wants to go with the system design, with the chip design for tools offering that. And you have various entry points for the customers, from SMEs, startups, up to the other RTOs or integrated device manufacturers, end users, so to speak. And they can come in with wanting a design and leaving with the integration, or come in with the integration and just need the characterization, test, and reliance. So this is very flexible. And in principle, now this is taken from the G7 discussion on collaboration or globally under the G7 countries. The idea is to really work together on pre-competitive levels of what is the heterogeneous integration roadmap. Standards is going to be very important in this opening. Then if you're looking at the advanced packaging and 3D integration, of course, it's the interconnects and active through silicon vias that you want to promote. You want to look into the integration of the other the RF technologies of photonic integration. And this is all based on what we call system design or system technology co-optimization, meaning the development with the design and hardware at the same time, simultaneously. And basically, the starting point would be to expand on existing international programs. There are several EU programs. That could be a core or a testing stone for collaboration to go further. And that's the end of it. Let me close here then.
Okay, right. Great. Thank you very much. It's an impressive network. Let me come back to that. But perhaps before we turn to you, one question I would ask you is, that's impressive by its diversity and by its geographical spread, and bringing anyone trying to bring research organizations, particularly that have their own profit center, is akin to herding cats, I would think. But do you have, in your view, do you have the scale that you need in terms of finance? I mean, I wouldn't question the quality of the research, but I would wonder if you think there are enough funds being made available. I realize no researcher ever has enough funds.
Well, if you ask a researcher that question, the answer is fairly clear, right?
But is this annoying or worrying, I guess is my question.
Of course it's worrying. No, I would put it this way. If you look at the last 2 decades of Fraunhofer, every 10 years we have doubled in size. So if you go back 20 years ago, it might have been 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people, and under €1 billion research budget, and then it doubled by 2010 or so, and now it's up to 3.3 or even higher. And our problem there is that we can do a lot more with industry. As you see, it's going up to 40, 50%. It's the government, the federal government can't keep up with us. So they are changing their model. This promise, €1 next year round for the industrial contract, €1 value, is hard for them to keep up with.
Understandably. Let me ask you just a quick question. What do you see as your strategic challenges? I mean, you've had to make some modifications, if I'm not mistaken, in your membership, but you're now involved in quite an international expansion. Can you address that a little bit?
I don't think that there's any significant modifications that have happened in our membership. I mean, we have been international from probably our earliest days.
China?
And we have had memberships from United States and Europe and most of the companies working very, very closely with Imec for years, right? And just like, you know, I think at every stage of our development, we reflected what the industry's interests as well as how the industry layout was at that point in time. And you continue to see that. And I think you're talking about China just now.
Well,
and the specific question is, yes, I think at some point in time, I mean, I was the president of a large in a large multinational company, and my first question from my board was, how much is your business in China? This was 10 years ago. You know, you had to show a plan for China and what you're growing there, otherwise you're dead. You know, the board would say, well, you're not growing fast enough. And if you fast forward from that, clearly the geopolitical situation today has changed, and we definitely are much more competitive in our positioning with China. And Imec has also done the same thing. We have reflected exactly what the industry is doing. We have divested our relationships with China and Chinese companies, and we moved away from that. And our focus is very much compliant with what US is asking for, as well as EU is asking for the same position as well. So I think that's a question in the rearview mirror.
I have more questions about your interest in cooperating here, but let me turn to you three and see. You know, what we talked about before the meeting is we're counting on you to ask some of the hard questions.
To ask them, not to answer them. I'm up for that.
Right,
that's great. As long as I don't have to answer any of the hard ones.
Fair enough. Please.
Look, I think so. First of all, thank you for inviting me again. I should say CSIS has been a really good partner for us in the government over the last 4 years at least or so that I've been there. A really good thought partner, a really good convening partner, and I've loved joining these sessions and these discussions. I've learned a lot, taken a lot away. So thank you again for that. I think, look, I don't have slides, first of all, because before I came to government, I was at McKinsey for many years. I'm still doing the detox from that. So I've been told not to touch PowerPoint. So I think, you know, if I look back at the CHIPS journey, starting at least with this administration back in the early 2021, you know, it's not as the president signed the act in August of 2022. We spent a lot of time getting the $39 billion, the manufacturing incentives program, going, because at that time there was a lot of pressure in terms of, look, you know, we were still in chip shortage, and all these companies saying, what are you doing? You gotta start building these fabs. And there was this sense that the R&D program was taking a back seat. It was not a fair sense, right? It was not fair for people to conclude that, but that was the assumption that people had. And I think the reason that happened was because some parts of the R&D program started to move faster than others, right? So for instance, metrology was first out of the blocks because it was at NIST. NIST obviously has a very strong legacy, tradition, talent base of metrology, so they could just hit the ground running.
And then, the advanced packaging program came after that because there had been a lot of thought already put in from folks at NIST and even across the interagency on how to think about, the different forms of advanced packaging. How do I think about, do I need to build a pilot line? How do I think about these things? And I think where things got a little bit, the perception was things were slower was on the NSTC. And the reason for that was because this is like a brand new entity. And if you look at the legislation, it's pretty vague, right? Commerce is going to set up this public-private entity, which is going to create a consortium of companies. Like, okay, so what is the structure? What is the governance? What authority does Commerce have on this thing, right? How much money can this entity take from outside sources? Which types of outside sources, right? Is it venture? Is it philanthropy? What is it? And so it took a while to sort all that out, right? And so then you saw, the creation of NatCast and the board and, Deidre coming in and things started to move. And so I think the reason I bring all this up is because a number of us have been having this conversation about collaboration with the allies on R&D, at least going back to my days, and presumably it was going back much further than that too, right? This is stuff that was going on in the original PCAST reports back in 2013, 2014, where the CHIPS thing was first seeded, that idea was first seeded. So one of the reasons I wanted to make sure that I was here today was to just reiterate, there is still an interest in collaborating with allies, right? There is still an interest in collaborating with Fraunhofer, with Imec, with Leti. And I think there are, from my perch at least, there are at least 3 levels of collaboration that we're now pushing on. Okay, so what we've seen is a lot of this kumbaya, let's all do this together, which is great. But then when you see the same conversation happening 3 years later, you're like, okay, hold on, are we not going anywhere or are we going around in circles? Like, either way, this is not a good situation. Let's move forward. So there's 3 levels of collaboration that we're trying to figure out how to move forward on. The first one, I think, is essentially at the project level, right? So, Patrick, you talked about the projects that you listed out there, right? Imec is doing a bunch of stuff on different, project areas. And NatCast is now out there. We've put out, the AI-enabled RF chip design, the manufacturing test vehicles. Commerce is now putting something out on the AI-enabled exploration of sustainable materials, right? So those are all, and each of those, talking about 20, 50, 60 million, those sorts of programs, where there's an opportunity to collaborate with the universities, for instance, that you're working with, right, on specific projects. And so we certainly encourage that kind of collaboration. That's a much more organic, technology and capability-driven collaboration, right, that you would expect, we at least would expect to see that bubbling from the ground up, right? We would expect to see, if Imec is sitting there with Purdue and Purdue is doing something on a specific project around design and test vehicles, like, well, if Imec is not part of that, we would probably ask the question to Purdue, like, what's going on? Why is there not this partnership? So that's one level, and I think that will proceed, but there are issues there that we have to sort out. So for instance, if there is IP generated from those projects, how do we think about sharing the IP across borders, right? Those are issues that have to be sorted out, but at least those are, there's momentum there, and we can, we feel good about that. Then there's a second layer of collaboration, which is the infrastructure collaboration. And I would include both the physical assets, like your pilot line, and the intangible assets. And there, I think there's still things that need to be sorted out. There's people who are working on these issues. There's people looking for opportunities. So for instance, there's METIS, which is the metrology exchange infrastructure that NIST has been setting up, right? Which is actually actively inviting people to come share this data set, right? Let's kind of figure out how we can mutually benefit from the collaboration around METIS. When the facilities start to get stood up, whether it's the EUV center or the advanced packaging pilot line, this question is going to come. How do we collaborate? And what I'd like to be able to see is more progress on that. So for instance, the NAPMP, the advanced packaging pilot line, and Fraunhofer's pilot line. Are we sharing a baseline flow? Is it going to be similar equipment, configured the same way, so I can easily port a process from one place to the other? Or is it not going to be that way? And if not, why not, right? And so those are questions that we have to sort out. Similarly with Imec, right? 300 millimeter fab up in Belgium. You know, if we're going to set up something here with an EUV center, what's the collaboration? Right. Has not been sorted out, right? And so those are places that I think we have to sit down and figure out from a facilities and infrastructure standpoint, what is the collaboration? What does it actually mean? And specifically down to these questions of the baseline process flows, the portability, all of that needs to be sorted out. And then there's a third level, which I think is where a lot of work still needs to be done, which is the thematic level, right? You talked about, Robert, on the panel, and I agree with this, right? The way to move forward, like, pick one problem. Pick two problems, fine, right? Okay, we're all big enough, fine. Pick three problems. But don't, you know, we keep talking about collaboration, but you need something to clear the pipes, right? You need one problem to work on together, one thematic area, to charge through and say, okay, there's all these issues, legal issues, IP issues, this and that. And that's the piece that I think, personally, I don't want to say I'm concerned. By the way, folks, you should know, I tend to carry a needle in my head, and if I see a balloon, I prick it. So the secretary used to say that, you know, if you want to know whether the glass is half empty or half full, just talk to this guy. He'll tell you exactly how we're going to die. But that's the thing that I would push on, is the thematic collaboration. Is there one topic? It may be scaling, right? It may be heterogeneous integration. It may be sustainability, right? The G7 talked about chip energy efficiency and sustainable manufacturing. Okay, two good places to begin, right? But could we start there and say, what does a thematic collaboration? Because if you can solve that, then all these other things fall into place. How do I share facilities? How do I share process flows? How do I share the IP coming out of different projects going to that theme, right? And so I think that's the piece that we would certainly want to work on collectively between Commerce, NatCast, Imec, Leti, Fraunhofer, all of us together.
Well, thank you. I think the secretary is right. You were quite able to prick balloons. But we thank you for that. And using your three levels, which I think is an excellent way of looking at it, one of the discussions I had the privilege of having with Dr. Weinstein yesterday was what we're talking about here is cooperation that has not been mandated. There has been to my knowledge, very little government encouragement. People on this stage and Dr. Anderson and others cooperate because it's in the interest of their membership and the interest of their institutions. And one of the things we've raised is that this organic cooperation has its own life, and it has its own, importantly, its own flexibility and adaptability. You know, one of the things I personally worry about with government initiatives is just because it's not working, there's no reason to stop. We're committed to this. And companies and institutions driven by companies tend to be much more reactive. And I wonder, and by the way, I think this is just a huge compliment to the community. They don't wait, they recognize the need, and they cooperate. Having worked on transatlantic cooperation for much of my career, I'm somewhat of a skeptic when we say we'll get the officials together and they'll work out a path forward.
So now it's your turn to pick balloons.
Yes. Well, I think we just have to ask whether that balloon has enough gas in it to go. No, because there are structural issues, and there's I think this incrementalism that you see, and this is open to your comment, is you know, the companies realize pretty quickly whether the deal is worth it, and as I understand it, are vocal when they think it's not. But they have the advantage that these institutions modify things when, to put it simply, when their membership comes in and they bang on the desk, they decide, well, great, what do you need here? How do we work this? I think that's much harder. at the government level. In my experience, we're convinced that we're going to get the Europeans to agree with us, and the Europeans are usually convinced they're going to get us to agree with them, which provides for a lot of trips back and forth between Brussels and Washington, but doesn't.
Wonderful. Right?
Yes. In any case, you take my point, and I think one of the questions is how. And I ask you, is what am I describing correct, and can the government provide light-handed guidance? But even there I stop a little bit, because we talk about how the industry changes so rapidly, we talk about how you have to be adaptable all the time, and at the same time we're going to provide government guidance. And I personally detect some incongruity in that. And that's a question for the three of you. I stop, but that's the type of, can we get together and agree on these broad, and implicitly, who does it?
So I can start, but I'd love to hear what you guys hear. Look, I think you're dealing with an industry that sometimes is a bit like watching a soap opera, right? Like you have, it's like this extended family. Everybody knows everybody else. There's a lot of baggage. And I'm sure we'll see it, right? I'm sure we'll see it in the EUV center, right? You know, you'll have one company coming and saying, okay, hold on a minute, you gave that other company some privilege that you can give, what the hell, like that's not fair, right? So I bring that up because you talk about the challenges of government-to-government collaboration. It's not as if company-to-company collaboration is all roses, right? It used to be, there was a time when you had open technology roadmaps, ITRS, everybody signed up, right? The industry is not in that phase anymore, right? For a variety of reasons. And so I would challenge the fact that government is the only entity here that has a problem collaborating, right? We're dealing with an industry that has its own challenges with collaborating with each other. That said, I think there are two modes that we're thinking about, okay? One is allow the organic stuff to bubble up and look for places where a targeted investment can reduce friction, right? So for instance, if you're seeing a lot of people clamoring about the same kind of an infrastructure bottleneck, I don't have a certain type of shuttle run capacity, or I don't have a certain type of design enablement. Okay, fine. We can go in there, inject some investment there, and that is a friction point that is emerging based on the organic work, right? And that is a posture that you'll see some people, they may not articulate it the way I'm articulating it, but you'll see a lot of people both at the R&D office and at NatCast taking that view of, okay, we let this stuff happen and we'll watch to see where the bottlenecks are emerging, and we can try to fix those. Then there's the other way around, which is what we were just talking about, which is almost like a top-down, you guys don't need to collaborate, but here's what the government is really interested in seeing, right? We really want to see something around how do I get rid of PFAS in the next 5 years, knowing that the industry has been trying to solve it for 20 years and is still struggling. So we could go that way too, right? Going that way, I think, and this gets back to the thematic piece, there's a bit of a challenge because the US government historically has had trouble. It's a weird combination of arrogance and low self-esteem, right? The US government is always like, well, we don't want to set the agenda, industry drives the agenda, right? But sometimes you do have to make those choices. And I think that's a challenge that we have to figure out within government is, would we go to the Europeans and say, let's focus on sustainable manufacturing? Because the moment you say that, there's going to be everybody else, what about chiplets? What about heterogeneous integration, right? What about this other thing? And you have to have that discipline of saying, yeah, we'll do that. But for the first 2 years, we're going to focus on this. And that's been the challenge. So that's what we have to figure out how we can solve at the government to government level. How do you prioritize?
There may also be the question, which we can't answer here, what about China? If we're busily working on cleaner chips and they're simply making chips, you get cost differentials.
Yeah, there's a whole other, sometimes people ask, what should a CHIPS 2.0 look like, right? And I think, CHIPS 1.0 is all supply side. It would be nice to see a 2.0 that has a demand side. If you want access to the US market or the European market, your chips have to meet these requirements. And that may be a way to address what you're getting at.
Great point. Let me get a reaction here.
No, I think Sri covered it very well. And yes, you have to pick the big rocks, the big boulders that you can work on. These have to have impact. Otherwise, people who are putting the money out there are basically going to come back and then say, well, okay, I put this much money, what did I see out of that? So you do have to pick those problems that are going to make a difference. And as we try to ramp up the ecosystem in the US, one thing that becomes very apparent is most of our companies are multinational. For good or for bad, they have started doing more things outside in terms of manufacturing, but within the country, we want to resuscitate that. But even if we do want to resuscitate manufacturing in the country, it is going to take at least 5 years for a brand new company to set itself up. Let's say packaging facility, an OSAT. It's going to be 5 years before they can get a design win into manufacturing. So for 5 years, how is that company going to sustain itself? And I think there is a very strong role that the government can play there with their industrial policy to help such situations. And that's just a thought from my personal side. And that's one way of looking at it. But the other side of the equation is R&D. If you do not have adequate and robust R&D facilities, it's very difficult for industry to say, I'm going to continue to grow here in a manufacturing environment. And I think that's where this whole ecosystem that's in this room needs to come together. There's a huge opportunity in the sense, for example, let's talk about packaging. And between Fraunhofer, us, and Leti in Europe, there has been tremendous amount of work that's happened. As we try to bring up pilot lines in the US, as we try to bring up the research capabilities in the US, working with universities, we really are proud of that. Purdue and Michigan and other universities that we work with, we are very happy with the activities that we do. But there is a huge database of knowledge that is being collected between all of us. How do we leverage that knowledge to sort of turbocharge what's happening in the US right now? What can we do to help NatCast and NAPMP and others essentially come up to speed so that we can all work together on moving farther and faster from that competition that we talked about? That is a real game here at the end of the day. If we try to come back up to speed and try to play around with this, how do I call it, the lower end of the spectrum here, we are never going to win this race.
Well said. Patrick?
And I get to figure out what kind of cherries did you guys leave on the cake. I very much agree with the three levels for the projects or the cooperation. You started off with asking how we perceive the government engagement. And usually in Europe, it's for us looking at 27 member states having all their individual interests and how to put up a plan that can satisfy all of them or they can go along with it. So for me, it's more like identifying roadblocks and getting rid of them. Industrial policy used to be a dirty word, but I think people have realized now it creates jobs and it's something to be fine-tuned. And there, I think there needs to be a collaboration among governments on that. Where for Fraunhofer, it's not the issue. It's just the guardrails that can be set. If I look at the three levels, we have projects with partners. We have standard IP solutions and regulations that can be extrapolated. It's something that's a learning process. And also sharing infrastructure or doing that. That goes along what I thought. And I'm looking at small steps to start. Condensation cores where you can start something and build and see how it can grow naturally. But of course, you need the right guardrails set by governments. But this infrastructure that goes along with standards and with common like manufacturing execution systems that are the protocols that you can actually exchange wafers, for instance. Those things are partially there, partially developed, but one has to then focus on it. And picking one topic is, of course, that's keep it simple. It's the first thing to know you'd want to do. So energy efficiency, I think, is something everybody understands. Sustainable manufacturing, too. But that it's easy to say those things and not look at the details because then you're stuck with PFAS or with other materials and. There's nothing sustainable in that so far. So,
Because I think, Chuck, the thing that we're trying to balance is how do you pick the boulders to really move the needle?
Right.
But you still have to gain everybody's trust. You still have to get results, right? You can't tell everybody, okay, come back in 6 years, we have to solve this problem. Like, no, they want to know, 6 months, 1 year, what are you doing? What results are you seeing?
Fair point, but not to abuse the analogy, but sometimes when engineers encounter a really big boulder, they go around it. And the question is whether or not you want to concentrate much of your R&D on PFAS, for example, in the short term, because that looks like a remarkably difficult undertaking. And the other question, and I'm not advocating this, but I get the impression when we talk that you have sometimes trouble coordinating Fraunhofer entities together. So since that's hard, let's try it internationally and globally. And I think it's worth a pause. But to take up in more positive vein, I think the idea of concentrating maybe some international resources on a couple of key challenges may work. But letting these institutions that have such a brilliantly performative record to work it on their own, and to reverse that in a sense, one of the things we might want to think about is for some of these longer term challenges you were talking about. We do have the mass and industrial policy of the Defense Department. It's called a procurement system. It doesn't actually procure often, but it spends a lot of money, so it must be good. And the question would be seriously to put out some cost plus contracts. Remember, that's what we did in the better days with the Minutemen. We didn't know how to do that, so we said, we'll buy this, go make it, and we'll pay you the cost plus 20%. So perhaps to keep some of these companies alive for a socially desirable technology, give them a cost plus contract. It'll be expensive, but we might get to where we want to go. Is that a little insanity to adopt a proven mechanism that doesn't work well to adopt to where we have a need that may be best addressed that way?
Yeah. I mean, if I may jump in here, I think I just wanted to touch upon two things. One is these boulders that you talked about, and the other one is what she was saying in terms of, what kind of, what are the technology drivers for CHIPS 2.0 as well. I think there's a connection between all this. Yes, engineers try to go around boulders, or sometimes, try to break the boulder. But it's, the kind of work that we are all discussing here is pre-competitive. The moment you do something that is in the competitive space, you are stamping on the toes of the commercial players, and that is bad. You really don't want to be there. So these pre-competitive areas that you're working on are always 5 plus 10 years. In fact, every technology piece that comes into manufacturing takes about 10 plus years. It's no, EUV, more than 30 years almost. And if you take high K metal gate, which I have burn marks on my back, and it took us 20 years to get there. Even silicon nitride took that much time to get in. So there are challenges that we can all identify, focus on, and go forward. But what is also very important is industry is changing, and that is where this CHIPS 2.0, whether it is here in Europe or anywhere else, we have to recognize that the industry is no longer what it used to be. Once upon a time, it was I have a new node that came from new material, or I applied some other approach to improve performance. Now go design everything around it. The software makers were going around it and making things happen. Today, it's the system makers who are telling what do I want to see in your chip. That's a very different equation, which is what has led us to think about chiplets and how do I heterogeneously integrate things and make some functionality happen, right? So any plans that we all make will have to look at that and how do we enable that aspect of what technology development needs to happen. And those are not easy problems to solve. They require standards, they require coordination, metrology methods, design tools that don't exist, lots of things.
Well, let me apologize to this group because I would love personally and professionally to continue this discussion, but there are rumors that there's another panel that needs to come. And I apologize for the time you've taken, but let's move forward with it. Great, thanks for this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So it's now my pleasure to moderate the panel on university CRO partnerships. And we're very fortunate to have join us senior representatives from two of our leading universities, Purdue and Arizona State. Let me first turn to Kevin McGinnis, who's Vice President of Strategic Technology Initiatives at Arizona State University. He's leading public-private partnerships related to microelectronics and other critical technologies. Before joining ASU, Kevin served for nearly a decade in national security and technology policy roles in the U.S. federal government, including most recently as Director for Research and Analysis on the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. So clearly ticking off a number of the boxes that we have been talking about today. So Kevin, would you like to get started?
Well, thank you so much, and Sujay, thank you for hosting. Thank you to CSIS for bringing this great discussion together. As we mentioned, I'll be talking a little bit about the role of universities with a focus on Arizona State, but I do think that our role as Arizona State in the cluster that's developing in the Southwest, it has some lessons for other regions and for other ways to think about the partnerships that can be developed internationally. So I'll just go through a few quick slides to introduce all of you to what's happening in Arizona and ASU's role, and then connect that more broadly to some of our international engagements. So here's the laydown of CHIPS investments. If you look at Arizona, just in the last several years, more than $100 billion in private sector investment. More than 40 companies have relocated or expanded in Arizona, and many of those are international companies from the countries that we've been talking about today. And then, of course, the workforce component, 16,000 new jobs just in the state alone. And our role as a university is to help make sure that we have qualified talent for all of those new jobs. Here's a rundown of some of the companies. This is not exhaustive for Arizona, but I think the key takeaway here is that we really touch all of the different major countries that we're focused on collaborating with, whether countries in Europe, Taiwan, Japan. And the interesting thing about the CHIPS and Science Act, the inflection point that we've seen, many of these companies were already in our ecosystem because they were focused on the manufacturing customers that they, like an Intel, for example, they might be a supplier to Intel. But with the CHIPS and Science Act, what we've seen is a much larger increase in R&D activity in our ecosystem. A lot of companies, when they're expanding or relocating, are bringing more R&D to the region. And you've heard it throughout the panels today. But that's really what we think makes a cluster like Arizona more sustainable, enduring, more cutting edge, is making sure that these international partners, as they're locating to the United States and trying to be as close to their customers like TSMC and Intel as they can, that they're also thinking about the ways that they can engage with universities and the ecosystems there on R&D. So we're located square in the middle of this cluster. Up on the right-hand side of the slide is our fab. It's a former Motorola fab that we've turned into an R&D facility, primarily focused on 300 millimeter tools. And again, we're between TSMC and Intel, and that really shows kind of the role that we play physically in connecting these places, both from an R&D standpoint, but also from a workforce development standpoint. How do we do it? So our role in the ecosystem is really threefold. We're focused on research, of course. We have more than 500 faculty members in engineering who are really our knowledge creators, our engines of R&D activity. But they work through physical infrastructure. We all know that semiconductors require a tremendous amount of capital equipment for R&D. And so our model has been around shared user facilities with a focus on industry engagement. So just as an example, over the last year, we've concluded a $270 million expansion to our facility with Applied Materials. That's a co-investment from the state of Arizona, ASU, and Applied Materials to really bring cutting-edge equipment to the ecosystem, closer to customers, closer to the workforce that will be moving to places like TSMC and Intel after they graduate. So it's really a win-win, but it shows the level of commitment that all of these different players have to make in these ecosystems in order for them to be cutting-edge R&D capable. The next thing we do is translation. So it's not enough to just do research. It has to be use-inspired. It has to have an impact. And so again, our focus there is on IP development, on launching startups, on helping faculty, researchers, and other small companies in our ecosystem have access to the capabilities to scale their technology to something that can have impact. of course, talent is the last part 3, workforce. So we have over 33,000 engineering students. That's just our engineering college. It's a massive, massive talent hub. And we're training them in interdisciplinary technologies. It's not just microelectronics, it's really the intersection of microelectronics in all different areas that are critical for this industry. And so coming back to this point of research, translation, and workforce development, we're always thinking in our partnerships, how can we bring these 3 core skill sets together? I put this slide up here just to show all of the different hubs. You heard from Erwin at the National Science Foundation earlier today about the NSF Engines programs. We're leading one of those, the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine. In microelectronics, we also lead the Southwest Advanced Prototyping Hub under the DoD Commons. And then with DOE, we have the electrified processes for industry without carbon. And I mention all of those different things, and not all of them are specifically microelectronics, but I mention them because they show that this conversation that we're having about semiconductors today and how it can be, how these research partnerships can be globally connected. There are parallel conversations happening in these other industries, whether in sustainability, whether in manufacturing without carbon. So thinking about not just the role that all these different organizations we've heard from today play in microelectronics, but also connecting them and how these different hubs that the government's funding, how can we make the sum greater than the parts, especially when we're thinking about global partnerships. I'm going to talk more about it here on my next slide, but when it comes to global connections, we're leading the first phase of the State Department's International Technology, Security, and Innovation Fund, and I'll just turn to that now. So this is really an effort focused on capacity building with our allies and partners. We've heard a lot today about cutting-edge research with partners in Japan and Europe and other places. At the same time, we're also, as part of the CHIPS Act, very engaged in nearshoring and reshoring, and that's, in some cases, moving manufacturing capacity to places that have not traditionally had a big role in the semiconductor sector. And so that actually, it's a capacity building effort on our part. We're doing a lot on workforce and helping those countries prepare to receive those investments and work with partners. But I also think there's an interesting R&D agenda that we can have with these countries. The United States remains the beacon of the world for R&D in many cases. And so while we're looking to partner with Europe and Japan and other places, classic R&D centers, long-standing R&D connections to the United States, we should also think about the role that we can play in partnering with some of these other countries that are more nascent, new to the semiconductor industry, and how we can help them raise up their workforce and R&D and really their entire engineering capacity and capability. This is a rundown of some of our global partnerships. Again, not exhaustive, but I think it just really shows the level of engagement that a single university. I think this is, again, not to talk too much about ISU, but just an example. I know many universities are having similar engagements around the world. In our own region here in North America, last year we hosted a trilateral semiconductor forum with the Semiconductor Industry Association to look at R&D partnerships in Canada and Mexico. We've also been deeply engaged, and just a couple of weeks ago had a nice visit to the Netherlands and Belgium. Similar for Japan. We've also had groups in Taiwan, of course, with our close connection to TSMC. And for Taiwan specifically, I'll mention, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, it's really a people-to-people connection, student exchanges. A lot of the R&D, it has to happen in the brain of a person, right? And we're training that person through our university system to be ready to be a leader in the field. And so how can we create these networks of allies and partners and folks that can move from country to country and have R&D networks that starts all the way back, in some cases before college, but certainly college into graduate school. And so I put all this out here as just the examples of the types of engagements that are happening, led by universities. One special shout out, we were very grateful to participate in a forum that the Ohio State University hosted a couple of weeks ago with Japan and a number of delegates from Japan. I think, again, it just shows the role that universities, not just ASU, but others, are playing to help organize this ecosystem. So I wanted to close with a couple of questions to generate discussion and a couple maybe modest proposals or hypotheses we might start with. And I think this reflects a little bit the conversation we had in the previous panel. I'm really interested in this question of networks. So how can the people that are being trained in universities, and that includes not only students but also faculty, move across borders, work with our allies and partners, spend time in many of these regions that we're focused on engaging with? I think we'll always see difficulties in moving R&D funding across borders, but people can move across borders much faster. And so I'm really curious in ways that places like ASU and Purdue and others can help form those people-to-people exchanges. The second point, again, I think this is similar to the last panel, thinking about the grand challenges that would bring these different regions and universities, industries together. We heard a lot about sustainability. I'm also very focused on supply chain security. I think that's another area where there's room for collaboration across these regions. It also differentiates us from some of our potential competitors. So I would just encourage us to think about supply chain security as an R&D part of the agenda. And then lastly, to come back to this question of how we work with other allies in developing regions, whether Latin America or the Indo-Pacific. There's a very interesting set of R&D topics there that could be integrated into this agenda as well, and they really focus on manufacturing challenges. As companies are moving to new locations, take TSMC moving to Arizona for the first time, for example, that creates a class of questions that I think, similar to our focus so far on cutting-edge R&D, we can also think about some of these manufacturing R&D challenges, whether metrology or yields, and with a focus specifically on bringing different countries together that maybe have not been as engaged in the semiconductor ecosystem to start. So I'll stop there. I'm very excited for the conversation. Great discussion so far. And again, thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you, Kevin. So let me ask some questions, but maybe come back to them. Turn to Vijay. Vijay Ranganathan is Vice President of Global Partnerships and Programs at Purdue University, where he's also professor in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He leads the Embedded Systems and IoT Lab, focusing on hardware and software architectures for embedded systems, IoT, and wearable electronics. His research emphasizes low-power design, micro-scale energy harvesting, and secure system design, which all seems quite sophisticated and beyond my comprehension, I'm sure. But Vijay, if you could sort of also explain a little bit about, what Purdue's mission is in this space and why it's engaging in these areas.
Thank you, Sujay, for the invitation. It's also nice to hear my technical interests being read out as part of a bio. It doesn't happen very often these days, so I'm glad for that. I don't have slides because I figured the last thing you want to do is ask a professor to speak for 15 minutes with slides. So I'll spare you the 67 slides and instead share some remarks, addressing some of the topics. It's been a fascinating day of discussions, and I wanted to add just a little bit of the university perspective on what we're doing at Purdue, but also more broadly, how we see the role of universities, specifically large public universities like Purdue, ASU, and several others, in really help moving the needle on this monumental challenge that we're all a part of, right? And we're so thankful to have the support of many partners, right? Several of you here in the room. I think, as I'm looking around, there's probably half of the people in this room that are connected to Purdue in one way or another, either personally or professionally. So very happy to have that that level of partnership. I will start by simply saying that at Purdue, we view our mission as advancing the scientific, advancing the scientific mission for chips and many other cutting-edge topics, but in a way that aligns very closely with the economic development mission of the region and the strategic diplomatic mission of the country. We really see the role of large public universities excelling, right, when they lean into the intersection of all three. It is the reason why, for example, a couple of years ago, back in September 2022, we had the pleasure and honor of hosting both Secretary Blinken and Secretary Raimondo at the same time, on the same day to campus, simply because we wanted to lean in to advancing those three missions together. And that cuts across, of course, workforce. It cuts across economic development with building ecosystems and regions, and it cuts across forming diplomatic and global partnerships across the world. I want to take you back, and this is the only part that I will refer to my phone on. Want to take you back to October of 1960, when Fred Terman, who was a longtime dean and provost at Stanford, originally a Hoosier from Indiana, said at the National Electronics Conference in Chicago. And he was talking about the role that universities will play in what he called the new era of electronics, right? And I'm going to quote here from him. In the new electronics era, education and educational institutions have a new and increasingly important role. Industry is discovering that for those types of activities that involve a high level of creativity and scientific and technological character, it is more important to be located near an educational institution, i.e. near a center of brains, than near markets, raw materials, component suppliers, transportation, or factory labor. Education is a natural resource of first importance to that part of the electronics industry that is growing through creative activity. That was way back in 1960. It is a philosophy that not only the universities, but really glad to see that many companies and the CROs that we've seen that participating here have leaned in so heavily on in the past several decades. If you look at Imec, if you look at at Leti, if you look at NY Creates, right, there's one thing which is common to all of them, which is that they are located right next to large leading research universities, right? And that's for a reason. It's not only for the workforce, but it's also for the crucible of innovation that these universities are, bringing together talent, bringing together research ideas, bringing together faculty and industry to help solve and address those big technological moonshots. Right? That is the power and that is the promise of closely looping in academia, and that's a vision that Purdue subscribes very strongly to. The scientific mission, of course, right, is core to what we do. In terms of the economic development mission, the Midwest is, I think, undergoing one of the biggest transformations that we've seen happen in that region, perhaps ever, with the bootstrapping of what we call the Silicon Heartland. And part of that is the exciting phenomenon of many industries as well as CROs, research organizations, establishing presence in the region. I'm very happy to see that at Purdue, in the sphere of chips and semiconductors, the first three big organizations that have established presence at Purdue are Imec, right, very thankful for that partnership, MediaTek, and of course SK Hynix with their HBM advanced packaging plant, right? All three of them, right? So Europe, Taiwan, Japan, right? Shows you the importance and the relevance of global collaboration right there. In terms of global partnerships, Purdue has been a preferred partner for not only universities and industries, but increasingly for partnerships that we're directly forming with governments in many cases. For example, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. We signed a partnership agreement with the government of India, the India Semiconductor Mission, to be sort of the flagship academic partner for all of the government of India and their subsidiaries and the educational institutions that fall under their purview, right, for joint workforce development R&D in semiconductors. We have a country-level partnership with Costa Rica, with Panama, with the Dominican Republic, just this week with Indonesia. Right? Last year in Japan, we were part of the Indo-US Upwards program that was signed at the G7 with Micron, TEL, and a number of universities, both on the US side and the Japanese side. Right? So that's another partnership that we're very happy about. The Imec presence on campus and the MediaTek presence on campus is expanding very fast. There's all kinds of interesting ideas that are being fertilized through discussions with faculty, and also increasingly with the government in Indiana, right? Trying to see how the government and the economic development corporations in the region can really lean in to support this, these kinds of partnerships and accelerate them, right? And helping not only workforce, right? These people will be big prospective employers, but also to establish that ecosystem. And so that's something that we're very happy to push on very aggressively. And that extends to the R&D partnerships, right? We have a fantastic working relationship with NatCast, thanks to Deirdre and her team, and Robert, very happy to see you step into this role, looking forward to many discussions. But also with industry, right? A couple of years ago, we formed the first comprehensive large-scale semiconductor degrees program that we announced back in September of 2021, well before Chips and Science became reality. We now have a leadership board of about 40 CTOs or executive vice presidents from all the top semiconductor companies that advise us specifically on semiconductor workforce and really fulfilling our commitment to be the nation's top source of talent for the chips and semiconductors industry, and we're well on our way to doing that. There's a number of new degree programs that we've launched, not only for the domestic market, but really looking at new modalities through which we could take the intellectual might that in chips and semiconductors at Purdue, right, and really project that out to our partners around the world in terms of joint educational opportunities, in terms of joint industry partnerships that we can form in other parts of the world as well. Right? So pretty happy to lean into that, and I'll turn it back to you.
Quite a rich set of priorities and activities. Let me ask perhaps the question. Universities have made there've been long periods of investments in the universities to make them the leaders in this area of knowledge and technology. You're now trying to partner with various other types of CROs and other organizations. In these partnerships, how do you make sure that the relationship also works for you as a university, as a center for regional development, and for your students? How do you make sure that the balance is there? Because you're providing the knowledge base, but how do you make sure that the return on that partnership is also balanced?
I have a very somewhat simplistic view on this. I think impact is the name of the game, right? And so that's what we're all engaged in the pursuit of impact. And I think these partnerships, the biggest ROI that we see is if that impact can be had jointly, right? And so that, I think it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy for that impact to be had if you get the right set of people together. And I see, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Patrick Wilson from MediaTek here, because he once said in a discussion last year that there's fundamentally only two things that you can do to move the needle if you want to have big achievements unlocked. A is talent, B is capital. Anything that you do inevitably boils down into one of these two buckets, right? And so we're happy to be the provider of talent, right? The cultivator of talent in many ways, right? The industry in a lot of ways brings in the capital, right? Brings in the pathways for these students to then go out and translate that impact and those ideas that they have into the real world, right? And so that's what we mainly see as the ROI. Right? And of course, there's other ROI in terms of providing pathways for students and all that, right? And engaging students even when they're in school, right? But the biggest, number one thing that we look for is that joint impact and evidence of it.
Great answer, and agree so much with that. I think picking up on this idea of use-inspired research or impact, that's certainly the metric that drives our thinking about partnerships. And really, we also think about at Arizona State, what can we do uniquely differently that other partners in the ecosystem cannot do? And I think for us, what we've learned is that, well, one, we've been very clear on our research agenda. We've picked a couple of topics in microelectronics R&D that we want to focus on. And then two, we're able to be a neutral convener for the ecosystem. All of these companies that are coming to Arizona or globally, fiercely competitive. But what we can do with our shared user facilities is allow a little bit more collaboration. And I think when we're thinking about the partnerships, it's very important to us that the partners that come into our ecosystem, come into our R&D fab, are willing to share, and maybe a little bit uncomfortably so. I mean, when we have conversations with partners about coming in, often they want to hold everything close, and then it takes some time to understand that, no, we do have a model where we can protect your IP. We do have a model where students can have access to this high-end equipment. We do have a model where startups can come in, access the equipment, and have greater impact. So that leads to sometimes some struggle at first, but we've been able to get there even with some of the biggest companies in the world. So I think the main lesson is if it feels a little uncomfortable, maybe that's headed in the right direction.
So the other question I have for you is, you're both state universities, very much responsible for addressing the needs of the state, but yet here we are at a symposium looking at allied cooperation. How do you balance, cooperating across the world with the local interests in the role of your universities?
Go first.
Sure. So, we're very fortunate to have strong support from the state of Arizona, and particularly from the Arizona Commerce Authority. And part of their role is attracting global investment into the ecosystem in Arizona, and we're closely partnered in doing that. That's why I mentioned some of those visits to countries around the world to figure out how can we partner. At the end of the day, though, we do need to show impact, and the way that for our local region, the way we do that is through jobs created, companies launched, the students trained that go into those jobs. So we're very focused on making sure we're meeting the needs of the ecosystem. But then we also see ourselves as playing a role in this global environment as well. And so it is a balance, but luckily the incentives are really aligned because we're hoping to bring those companies and also externally partner with those countries in their locations as well.
Just to add to that, I think as a land-grant university, our mission really is the economic upliftment of Hoosiers, right? The people of the state of Indiana, and making them better citizens, for the country. And global interaction is such an important piece of that. It's not only bringing those companies and giving them exposure, the students at Purdue and the people in the region exposure to these global companies, but it also goes the other way, right? You want the citizens and you want the residents of Indiana to go out, see the world, and then come back, right? Because they will bring an entirely new perspective on everything from innovation to how things work, right? And they end up thinking differently and thinking more innovatively. So that's an important piece. So we certainly see global outreach and allied cooperation as very much part and parcel of the land-grant mission.
So maybe final question, because we need to move on, and then there's a final. I think we're running a little late, but this has been such a rich conversation through the day, and certainly now. So as you look to cooperate internationally, and this sort of goes back to the conversation in the last panel, what Sri Ramaswamy was saying about what is the role of the government, what are the role of government sponsored entities like NatCast as it's emerging to help to break or to ease the challenges of cooperation that you see with international partners?
I'll maybe say a couple. I loved all the comments on the previous panel. Sri and the other panelists, I thought, did a fantastic job at really hitting the nail on the head. One aspect that I think that's on a lot of people's minds as we talk about cooperation and collaboration internationally are those two words: export control. It is reality, right? It is that's just the nature of the world we live in, right? And all of us will have to adjust to it and figuring out, navigating our way around this complex world. But one of the things I think with a topic like export control is I think there tends to be sort of too much of a mystique, boogeyman kind of build-up that's given to export control, and that's where I think government entities and the government can help demystify some of that a little bit to stakeholders like the industry, to academia, to research organizations, so that it's not. Right now, many of those other entities look at this and say, oh, there's export controls, that's this big scary beast. Let's not even go anywhere near it. Is it really worth our while engaging in this, going down this path because of that? So I think demystifying some of that will certainly help in fostering some of these collaborations. The other thing I want to highlight is maybe supporting partnerships where, and I'll pick a very specific example. There was talk of, look, there's 300 millimeter lines in Europe. There's a 300 millimeter line here with Creates. How do we enable those two to get to talking with each other? I will humbly suggest that there's another way of looking at it, right? Certainly, yes, those two should talk, but there's another way of thinking. Look, what are the, let's say, the bridge facilities that can exist in universities, in places, for example, like Purdue or Arizona State, right? Maybe it's a 200 millimeter line, right? Which will then serve as a connector, right? So if you want cooperation, you want collaboration, you need bridges, right? And so literally, right, sort of having a bridge facility that enables this whole lab, academic lab, to sort of commercial scale, leading edge fab. Those are places that you really want to see the collaboration exist, right? And so that's another way of looking at it in terms of maybe facilitating those kinds of vertical, collaborations.
I completely agree. I think the guidance around export controls and partnerships, it would be very helpful in clarifying some of that. As we're operating things like a DoD Microelectronics Commons or any of the other CHIPS and Science Act programs that I mentioned, I think clear guidance about which countries and how to engage with them would be very helpful, and it would demystify some of the questions and concerns that Vijay mentioned. The other thing that the government can help with, I think, is setting some of this research agenda, and where there is the opportunity for shared incentives that actually force us to work together, force us to collaborate with the European Union or Japan in order to tackle big problems, whether security or sustainability. I think that type of, again, hard to move R&D money across borders, but where we can do it to focus on particular problems, I think that would be a very strong incentive to bring partners like universities and companies into the mix.
Well, I just wanted to thank both of you. I think this has been a really interesting conversation. I think we could perhaps continue like this for another good half hour if we had the time. There's a final panel, so there'll be a quick, basically an AV break while we get the new panelists on board. It's just a quick speed round from some of the folks who are in the room as to what their key takeaways from the day are, and any ideas in terms of the future, in terms of the agenda that we are faced with. So with that, can we have a small round of applause for these three gentlemen?
Hi. This is like a rewind of the show that you just saw. What I'd like to take the opportunity is ask some very informed people what they see as some of the key takeaways from this meeting and any policy suggestions that they might have. I'll ask them to introduce themselves quickly, but on my left here we have Joe Passetti, who is the vice president here in Washington representing Imec, although he's not often in Washington. He's either in between the Netherlands and Purdue, I guess would be. But in any case, Joe's been a great ally to the program, and we're very pleased to have him here. Why don't you?
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate the opportunity to talk here. I think that it's been made clear, right, that there's a resounding agreement that the best policy is to maximize collaboration and coordination. The best policy doesn't always win, so I think that we need to sort of minimize obstacles to that and try to facilitate it wherever possible. I mean, two specific questions on how you move this forward is what is the venue, right? There's been talks of the G7 and other things. I mean, what is the right place to continue this conversation in a more official capacity? How big is that group? What are sort of the bounds of that conversation? I mean, people are, very open in a general sense in a large audience, and then the sort of real proposals and ideas come out in one-on-one meetings. I mean, how can you sort of structure a discussion that really moves things forward in a tangible way without excluding people? I mean, these are, often public programs. There are, openness and transparency and other rules. And in a related matter, one thing that, could often come up is as you're having a discussion about sort of general high-level topics of how we can collaborate either on an organization mode or other things, there are calls for proposals, there are solicitations open that, there are potential legal and conflict of interest issues where you're having a general conversation about, how, say, Imec and some, government research organization could collaborate in a general way. Well, can the government entity share back ideas about what it would like to receive from the RTO in question without sort of indicating in a way that is untenable what it's interested in, or kind of indicating what might be some funding proposals in the future? I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that this is what's in the interest of the industry and everyone, but there are some specific landmines and policy issues that need to be overcome.
Thank you for making that point, because I think that just reflects someone who does do cooperation and understands some of the realities of the challenges. Joe, please introduce yourself briefly and
Sure.
give us your take.
Thank you for having me. My name is Joda Tongnapnua. I'm a special advisor at the U.S. National Science Foundation's Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate. And this has been a fantastic event. I think it really underscored that in microelectronics and semiconductors specifically, it truly is a global supply chain, and there's no extricating ourselves from that. That's not it cannot be a realistic policy objective to say that we're going to do this by ourselves. We need a strong range of values-aligned allies that are going to be at our side, and we have to work very closely with them. I was just having a conversation with Patrick from MediaTek outside, and I think we had a brief conversation about how critical the talent component of this work is going to be. I think that as we imagine everything from sort of the non-baccalaureate pathways to technicians all the way up to how do we produce enough electrical engineers, as NSF's the largest federal funder of research in the country, but how do we make sure that we are really engaging our academic institutions? We've heard some fantastic examples today about how we are training up that next generation of talent to not only do the work around scaling up fabs here in the United States, but also thinking about R&D fabs, thinking about AI-assisted design, digital twin technology. We're going to need all hands on deck here. And so I'm going to go back to our team and think through, as we're putting together our workforce development plan in partnership with other agencies and our colleagues at the White House, how does the National Science Foundation, through notices of funding opportunities and some of our programs like experiential learning for new and emerging technologies programs, where we fund not just workforce development programs, but we're also funding exploration of new models on how we train people. What does that look like? How do we better drive funding into not only academic institutions, but workforce boards, trade schools, community colleges that can really ensure that we have the workforce necessary to support what is going to be a highly competitive industry, and it will be years into the future, where talent is going to be an input that becomes increasingly important.
Just very briefly, do you have the resource? You mentioned community colleges. Do you have the resources to reach out to the community colleges, because they're crucial in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we do, but we've begun that work now with Chips and Science invested and put a down payment essentially on some of that work. So through our NSF Regional Innovation Engines program, which my boss, Assistant Director Erwin Giancandani, spoke about earlier today, every single NSF engine has a community college as a partner, and most of them are funded through that program. Now, that is a start. We are about 40% of the way through the 5-year period that was outlined in Chips and Science, and then we've received collectively about 7-8% of the funding committed.
Did you say 78 or 70?
7 to 8% of the funding that was authorized was actually appropriated. So the role that Congress is going to play is going to be vital in saying, all right, we've seen the success of what not only TIP and NSF can do, but all throughout the federal government, from our colleagues at the Department of Commerce and EDA, and not only in Division A, where we focus really specifically on semiconductors, but also in Division B, the and science part of the bill, about what really projecting out, what does the future look like for this industry? Those are dollars that ultimately could flow to community colleges in much greater numbers. And we've been talking with the Employment and Training Administration about what does new models look like, where we partner with workforce boards and trade schools and community colleges. And we even just recently signed an MOU with the AFL-CIO, the largest labor organization federation in the country, to really explore this work. But again, I think, and we have every confidence that they will, Congress is going to need to double down on their initial investment, so that way we have the resources to reach all of the institutions necessary to do the work.
Thank you. I think that's an important call out.
Miriam Cope with NatCast. I think one very strong point that just really jumped out to me in all of these discussions is that these other nations have invested so much for so long in their applied research institutions, and the U.S. is really running to catch up. So NatCast has had a tremendous number of announcements this year, and we have a lot more work to do. So thank you, Robert, for joining us. But we really have to make sure that we make what's available to our international partners, some version of that is available in the United States. And I think coordinating the research areas and coordinating what are the big moonshots that we're all going to work on together is going to be incredibly important. And I think Robert will have a key role in that, and also our member companies. Because if you're an applied research organization, what I heard from all the panelists is that the companies have to be able to support you financially for their research project, and also bring that talent development pipeline to bear to make sure that they're developing their expertise. So they're sending their people to your Applied Research Institute and developing their talents, because we really need more of that pipeline. And it's the workforce programs, but it's also these R&D programs. So I think those are my two big takeaways, that the U.S. continues to be a little bit behind on having a national applied R&D center, and we're catching up. And secondly, we really need that private sector participation with both funding and workforce.
I think it's an excellent point, and one which is central to the focus of Dr. Shiva Kumar's program here. Isn't there some tension, though, between the needs of the industry on a yearly basis and the desire to take these great challenges on over the long term?
Yeah, I think the semiconductor industry is a little bit unique because it has always been inspired, at least in the past several decades, by Moore's Law. We might be moving into what some people call Jensen's Law. And so as a whole, the engineers who drive a lot of this R&D agenda and R&D spend, they take a look that's 5, 6, 7 years out. And although Wall Street really hates it sometimes, that's just the way that they're trained and built. So I feel comfortable that if we get academia, the research community within the companies, the local state stakeholders, and the federal government kind of like all in a room around a moonshot goal, you can actually go pretty far out with those perspectives.
Well, I think that's a good answer, although I'm reminded of Craig Barrett's, the former CEO of Intel's, comment once to our work in the National Academies, where he said, if I want to sink my stock price, I just simply announce a major investment in future technologies. And last but not least, introduce you.
Nelson Felix. I'm with IBM Research in Albany, New York. I'm currently a director on our business development team, but I've spent the last decade essentially trying to build our ecosystem around semiconductor research on the campus of New York Creates. So there's I think a lot of what was said here today, I'm sure we're all preaching to the choir to the most part. But thank you for inviting IBM Research here. I think, we're not a government agency, we're not a nonprofit research center, we actually are a commercial entity. But I think the journey that IBM has taken in semiconductors in the last few decades is sort of a mirror of a lot of what we're talking about here today. And it's a journey we've taken organically, but I think the benefits of what we've seen in taking an ecosystem approach just underscores a lot of what we're talking about here today. So for me, there was like 3 takeaways. One is, so for the last few decades, we went from a company that was very vertically integrated. We made our own equipment, we formulated our own chemicals, to probably within a span of a decade, essentially partnering with the entire ecosystem to do the same. It really underscored how in this industry you do have to build a level of trust with the internationally, with your partners, and also with your competitors, to be honest. And I think Miriam said it, right? What we're talking about is innovation has a timeline of 5 or 7 years. And to be able to engage with a partner in a program where the payoff is not until 7 years from now, you have to be able to trust the partner that you're sitting at the table with. And I think that only comes with a level of familiarity. I think almost every industry event is like some class reunion. I was just telling someone. And it's just because the fact that it's been around for so long, but we have events like this where people get together and talk about their issues and are able to break down those barriers. And that's something that we at IBM Research have done for the last few decades, is partner heavily in how we develop technology, but also how we propagate that technology. Because it's by no means in a pre-competitive space, but we recognize that if we want to be able to enjoy that technology in a robust way, it has to reach some sort of exit velocity. And it cannot reach that if we're just doing it in isolation. Even if that's technology that ultimately goes to our competitors, the leverage of that weight, and the fact that the whole ecosystem can enjoy the benefit of that innovation, it does boomerang back to us, even though we're operating in not a pre-competitive space. So I think in the private sector, we're very used to understanding how we do that IP sharing. But I think one of the things that was brought up today is how do we do IP sharing across international boundaries with funding mechanisms where the funding doesn't want to cross that boundary, right? We want to keep that funding local. And I'm not sure that's a problem that we've solved collectively, right? How to do that IP sharing internationally for things that we're talking about here today. I think everyone in the room is committed to, wants to do that, but what are really the mechanisms where we can build that trust, but maybe also those policies that allow for that. A couple other things very quickly, though. So IBM Research itself is also a global entity. It has multiple research centers in the US, East Coast, West Coast, Zurich, Japan. Each one of those is its own center of gravity for a very particular skill, and I think Erwin brought it up in the morning, is that part of what can foster success is you can build these centers of gravity of innovation that are somewhat localized to what is some competitive advantage or center of gravity of innovation. And it's an approach IBM has taken, and I think that informs the approach that the industry can take. And then the last one is, I think the shared investment approach that we've taken ourselves on the campus of New York Creates over the last 20 years has borne a lot of fruit for us as a private entity, right? Accelerating the adoption of EUV, being able to mature, our 2-nanometer technology. That's all happened in an ecosystem where no one had to make 100% of that investment. That investment was heavily leveraged, but everyone was able to have the benefit of that investment. And those technologies, like I said, have reached escape velocity, and not just because we held them close, but because we let them spread.
I think those are very good points. And in fact, Washington is not often a place where you can come as a corporation to get compliments, but I think IBM, and particularly your Vice President for Research at the time, merits a massive thank you for its reach out to help create New York Creates and help create the Albany Nano Center. That was a brilliant move, which has provided a national center and transformed the region at the same time. I mean, it was very altruistic and at the same time certain benefits to the corporation.
Yeah, so I wrote the word altruistic in my notes here because it's, in fact, maybe not, right? Because it does boomerang back to us. We do get a benefit in the end.
But so does the region, so does the nation. Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you to IBM, and thank you for this flash review of a very complex and very rich and I think very interesting set of discussions. My only takeaway is that we need to do more of this. We need to talk with each other and explore this ecosystem. I think what we heard from Purdue and Arizona State is incredibly rich and needs to be better understood here in Washington. And just a word of caution, many of you know each other. Not everyone knows what Imec is, much less what Fraunhofer is. And sadly, not everyone knows what the New York nanocluster is. So I think it's important that we try and propagate, as you suggest, those ideas, the value of those assets, and both the value and imperative of cooperation, but also the complexity of that cooperation. But we need to work at it, not just sit back. So thank you very much for your time, and we apologize for running over our time, but we'll offer you food in recompense.